A kingdom of dust and dreams lay behind a warped attic door, and Ava Thorne guarded it with the smudged tip of a charcoal stick. The house below was a maze of obligations and watchful eyes, but up here the air belonged to her. It smelled of dry timber, old rope, and the faint sweetness of lavender caught in forgotten linens. Dust rose in quiet spirals each time she shifted her weight on the creaking floorboards, and the light from the one narrow window cleaved the dimness into bright, slanting planes that turned the suspended motes into slow constellations. On a salvaged sheet of parchment spread across two crates, a wolf ran through a forest that did not exist anywhere but in the pressure of her hand. She gave it a world to breathe in. She gave it a sky. She gave it freedom because she did not have any to spare for herself. The lines obeyed her, and that obedience steadied her pulse. The wolf's shoulders bunched beneath a hide of cross-hatched shadow, its muzzle lifted toward a moon she had teased into being, with a pale thumbprint and a halo of rubbed graphite. Beyond it, the trees rose too tall for any saw, each trunk a column of murmuring bark that pressed upward against the margins of the page. And the ground fell away into a ravine crossed by a fallen log that could have been a bridge or a grave marker depending on who walked across it. She had not yet decided. Deciding was a luxury that belonged to other people. Here, she could pretend that choices were hers to make. Downstairs, choices were made for her, and they always cut. Ava paused to flex her cramped fingers. Black dust ringed her nails and fogged the whorls of her fingerprints. The half-sleeve of her worn dress had slipped from one shoulder, and the exposed skin had taken on the attic's chill, but she did not tug the fabric back into place. She listened instead. The house had its own language. It creaked and sighed and muttered to itself in beams and plaster, like an old man who had seen too much and kept talking, because forgetting would be worse. Directly beneath her, the corridor ran like a river of footsteps. The servants moved through their tasks, with the quiet economy of people who had learned that silence preserved more than dignity. Farther away in the study, a decanter stopper clicked against crystal, and a low voice poured over itself in measured phrases. Lord Marcus Vale did not shout. He did not need to. His disappointment filled rooms like smoke. Her hand returned to the drawing. The wolf's eyes needed more weight. She darkened them until they were shards of night caught in fur. She imagined the forest's smell. Wet bark, iron, and moss. The wind would carry notes of something bright and cold coming in from the mountains, and in that bright cold would be a taste of possibility. She bent closer until the paper blurred. She had learned long ago that the trick to surviving was to make the lines of another world thick enough that you could walk them like a path. When the path was true, the door would not matter. The lock would not matter. The man on the other side would become an outline you could erase. The footfall on the ladder made the charcoal jump in her hand. It was a single, deliberate step, and then another, and with each one, the attic seemed to shrink until the low roof pressed closer, and the shadows flattened under the weight of an unseen gaze. Marcus never climbed to her refuge. He sent for her, and the messenger's knock was a blow she could prepare to receive. This was different. The rung groaned again. She put the charcoal down because she did not want to snap it with her own trembling. The door swung inward and struck the wall with a report that scattered the dust constellations. Marcus Vale filled the threshold with the clean lines of a man who was exact in all things. He wore gray like a blade wears winter. A heavy ring sat on his forefinger, and a wolf's head was engraved into the seal so deeply that the metal looked wounded. His hair had gone silver, not with age, but with precision, as if a careful hand had painted each strand into obedience. His eyes were pale and unreadable, the color of water that had forgotten the sky. He stood for a moment and inhaled as if the room were a ledger he was adding to, and then he stepped fully into the light. Still hiding with your little messes, he said. The silk of his voice could cut skin. He crossed the floor without looking at where he placed his feet, because the house itself would have shifted to accommodate him. He stopped beside the crates and surveyed the forest Ava had called out of paper. His mouth tilted in a shape that was not a smile. Such industry, so much effort, and nothing earned by it. Ava kept her gaze on her hands. It was safer to look at what could not betray you. A smear of charcoal had turned the pad of her thumb gray. She rubbed it against the threadbare skirt until the stain blurred into a softer shadow. The attic's cold found its way through the soles of her shoes, up her calves, and lodged behind her knees. Her body wanted to fold around the chill the way you might fold around a wound, but she remained straight. Marcus reached for the paper and then did not pick it up. He let his ring kiss the edge instead, and the metal made the light jump. Your mother used to draw as if the world would end if she stopped, he said, and the sentence was so unexpected that Ava's head tilted before she pulled it back under control. She believed that pictures could hold monsters in place. Your father believed that strategies could do the same. He was wrong, and she was wrong, and now they are dead, and all we have is the bill they left behind. He pivoted away from the crates. The movement placed his shadow over her like a dropped cloak. Ava could taste dust at the back of her throat. The house had fallen silent. Even the servants' corridor had drawn a breath and held it. What use are you to anyone, Ava? He asked, and he asked it as if he were asking what use a cracked cup might be, or a blunt knife that could no longer take an edge. He did not look for an answer. He had already found it. Ava did not speak. Words were traps in this house. If you offered one, Marcus would set it, and the teeth would close on your own sentence. She kept her hands quiet in her lap and thought about the path in the drawing. She placed her feet on it in her mind and walked. The fallen log was narrow and slick with moss, but below the ravine a ribbon of water flickered like a star the world had misplaced, and there was a thin, honest wind that felt like a hand on the back urging her forward. She walked with her eyes open on her skin, not on her uncle, and it steadied her. He exhaled a soft imitation of a sigh. Games are for children and fools, he said. You have been indulged in both. His attention shifted to the small trunk against the far wall. He lifted the lid without asking. Inside, Ava's few treasures made a fragile country, a cracked ceramic cup with a blue rim, a scrap of ribbon that had once been red, a bundle of charcoal wrapped in oilcloth, a small knife with a missing scale. He let the lid fall with a clap that made the window rattle, and then he smoothed an invisible wrinkle from his sleeve in apology to the fabric. A messenger has come from the capital, he said. The words changed the temperature of the room. The cold became thinner and much more dangerous. You have been summoned before the court. Ava's fingers tightened, and a thin sound of charcoal rubbing charcoal whispered beneath her nails. She had been to the market. She had been to the well. She had been to the corner where the street bent away from the square and you could hear the training ground beyond the wall. She had never been to the court. The court belonged to alphas and soldiers and those who built the scaffolding of law and used it to keep others off the ground. And Omega walked there only to sweep the stones or to be seen being nothing. The attic's light wavered, and then she realized it was her own breathing that had gone thin. For what purpose? She asked. And the sentence came out, carefully assembled and placed on the floor between them like an offering that might appease a god if the god were not already hungry. Marcus rolled the ring on his finger. The wolf's head flashed and vanished. Purpose is beyond you, he said. Outcome is what matters. You will dress. You will come down when I send for you. You will keep your eyes where they belong. He turned as if the conversation had ended before it began. At the door he paused. It is convenient that you know how not to speak, he added without looking back. It will make the day shorter. He descended the ladder with the same measured tread that had announced him, and each step felt like a clock that had remembered its business. When the last echo had slid down into the bones of the house, Ava let her shoulders drop. The attic was still a small kingdom, but the border had moved inward a pace or two, and she could feel the loss like a draft. She stood and went to the window. The glass wore a skin of grime that softened the world into charcoal and smudge. If she pressed her forehead against the cold pane, she could see a slice of the courtyard and the arch of the gate beyond it. The stables crouched under a roof of split shingles, and a young groom moved between the stalls with a pail in each hand like a priest bearing offerings. A hawk balanced on the high wall and turned its head in cunning degrees, its eye a coin of polished amber. The sky beyond the gate was clean and unsympathetic. Ava touched the sill with her fingertips. The wood had been scarred by old nails, and the scars had filled with dust. She remembered her mother's laugh in sudden pieces, as if someone had dropped a bowl and those were the shards that could be found on the floor. She remembered her father's hands, broad and warm, closing over hers to guide a shape from paper into being. She remembered the smell of smoke and the color of night when it is full of running. She did not remember the court. She would learn it the way one learns a trap, by studying the teeth and respecting the spring. She left the window and washed her hands in the chipped basin. The water was cruelly cold and turned to a pale ribbon that bled down the drain. The charcoal lifted in gray thread-like veils, but a portion of it stayed where it had wanted to live. She wiped her hands on the cloth and smoothed her skirt and set the charcoal carefully back in its bundle. The forest on the page watched her with patient eyes. She breathed once, twice, and the attic breathed back. When the knock came, it was not Marcus. It was the housekeeper, Alia, whose hair had been braided so tightly that it looked like a question someone was refusing to answer. She kept her eyes on a respectful point beside Ava's shoulder. Respect is a thing that can be faked if one is very tired. "My lady," she said, and the title slid in the air as if it had lost its way. "Lord Vale bids you come." Ava followed her into the narrow throat of the corridor and down the ladder that made her toes bite for purchase. The house gathered around them with its smell of beeswax and old leather and something medicinal that Marcus liked to burn in a shallow dish when he thought too many things had been touched. The stairs had been waxed until they reflected a thin version of the world, and Ava descended through that reflection toward a hall that had eaten many mornings and would eat this one too. Marcus waited by the door that faced the street. Two men stood at his shoulders, not guards, but the kind of men who have decided that their hands will be ready if anyone asks to borrow them. They wore wool in the color of obedience and knives in the color of argument. Marcus took in Ava from hem to hair and found nothing to comment on. There was relief in that, bitter and small. The door opened on a morning that had been sanded clean by wind. The cobbles shone as if someone had licked them. A carriage waited with its windows shuttered, like a face that did not intend to read anyone else's expression. The driver wore the blue of the capital and the furrow between his brows of a man who liked to arrive before he left. Marcus did not offer his arm. He did not need to ask if she would come. A nod sent one of the men ahead to open the carriage, and Ava mounted the narrow step with the concentration of a tightrope walker taking the first stride. The interior smelled of leather and the muted scent of pine oil, and the cushions had the indolent softness of things that never have to remember what a hard surface feels like. She sat with her hands folded and her knees closed and kept her eyes where they belonged, which was on nothing. Marcus entered after her and sat across with the posture of a man who does not bend unless it will serve him. The door closed, the sounds of the street flattened, and then altered as the wheels began to turn. The carriage moved through the city, and the city moved past the carriage, and the difference between those things was a matter of who believed what. Ava watched the light change in a thin sliver between the shutters. People became shadows. Stalls became smudges of color that suggested apples and cloth and knives. A child ran and became a streak that made her heart lurch, because running is always a kind of prayer. A bell tolled somewhere beyond the river and counted something important. She sat very still and listened to her body count its own smaller things: breath, pulse, the bite of the cushion through the fabric at the back of her knees. The constellations of dust that had begun to settle in the long folds of her skirt like a map of a sky that was not quite hers. Marcus spoke only once. "The court has little patience for untidiness," he said. "You will remember that your name is mine." Ava thought of the wolf on the page. She thought of the bridge that might be a grave marker, and of the wind that was a hand. The carriage climbed and the street steepened into the hill that bore the buildings that mattered more to men like Marcus than the people who lived under their shadow. The horses leaned into the traces. The driver clicked his tongue and sawed the reins with discretion. The city thinned, and stone took on the grand, impersonal strides of power. When the carriage stopped, the silence inside it changed shape. Marcus rapped his knuckles once on the roof. The door opened, light flooded in and made them momentarily less solid. Ava stepped down into a courtyard paved in squares of dark granite that had been polished until clouds walked there on their way to wherever clouds go to sleep. The great hall reared ahead, a cliff of carved stone whose gargoyles wore expressions too tired to be judgmental. Flags hung without wind, and their stillness felt like the held breath of a creature that could kill and had not yet decided to do so. Marcus offered her nothing. The men fell in behind them. She crossed the yard and mounted the shallow steps and moved under a lintel that had collected a century of wishes and ground them down into a smoothness that did not reflect. The doors opened like the mouth of something vast. The sound inside the hall hit her before the sight did. Voices gathered into a living weather, drifting and dropping, catching on carvings and falling again. Boots knocked against stone in a rhythm that made her bones want to march. Metal spoke to metal in the language of promise. The sight caught up, and she saw the tiers of benches and the sweep of the floor and the throne that had grown like an outcropping from the dais, because the mountain itself had decided that men needed a place to sit if they were going to pretend to be larger than they were. Ava kept her eyes on the flagstones because that is where one places them when one intends to continue breathing. She had the sense of many faces turning toward her like sunflowers toward a reluctant dawn. The sound adjusted around her presence, and in the adjustment she felt herself become the answer to a question she had not heard. She walked, and the echo of her steps wrote itself ahead in small, nervous letters. She did not look at the throne. She did not need to. Power has a temperature and a gravity, and it draws the air into different shapes. It seemed to her that the air near the dais had thickened, and that the light had found another color to be, one with weight in it. She knew without knowing that someone sat there the way you know there is a storm waiting just beyond the ridge. Marcus guided her without touching her to the center of the hall. He stopped, and she stopped. He breathed in, and she listened to the breath, because it would be the shape of what happened next. He let it out slowly, and when he spoke, the sound went up like smoke and stuck in the rafters. "An omega from my house," he said, in need of correction. The word correction fell like a stone into a well and went down and down without finding water. A hush moved outward from the impact, slow and complete. Ava felt the hush pass through her and leave a hollow that would accept anything poured into it. She looked at the flagstones and saw that one of them had a hairline crack. It ran from one corner to another as if the stone had wanted to be two things and had tried to tear itself into halves that could disagree without touching. Ava placed her mind on that line, the way a tightrope walker places a foot, and began to cross. She did not lift her head. She did not speak. She felt rather than saw the gaze that had not shifted since she had stepped into the hall, a gaze that came from the place where the air had weight and the light had gravity. It moved over her like a hand that understood weapons. It paused as if it had seen something it had not expected to find, and in that pause, Ava felt the thinnest current of warmth like sun striking the edge of a blade and finding a way to be gentle. She did not look up. She walked the crack in the stone with her eyes and with the careful stance of someone for whom balance was not a trick but a necessity. The forest on the page waited in the attic, and the wolf ran still. She would learn the court the way she had learned dust and light. She would be silent for as long as silence kept her teeth in her mouth. She would count breaths until counting became a kind of courage. And somewhere beyond the hush and the gravity and the stone, something ancient and hungry shifted on a throne of mountain and shadow and watched her cross a line that neither of them would be able to uncross. The great hall of the court was a cathedral built not for worship, but for power. The ceiling vaulted into shadows that seemed to breathe, and the carved gargoyles that stared down from their perches looked less like guardians than witnesses to endless cruelty. The stone floor gleamed with the polish of centuries, each reflective slab bearing faint ghost echoes of those who had stood here before pleading, confessing, dying. The air was heavy with beeswax and cold stone and the musk of wolves in human skin, a scent that thrummed with unspent violence. Ava Thorne stood at the center of the floor, the hem of her plain gray dress trembling around her ankles. The hall was full rows upon rows of alphas and betas, their fine clothes whispering as they shifted, their eyes sharp with hunger for spectacle. On the dais above, the throne of dark iron dominated the space. She did not look at it. The knowledge of who sat there pressed against her ribs like a second heartbeat, too fierce and too large. Beside her, Lord Marcus Vale radiated satisfaction. He was calm as ever, his hands clasped lightly behind his back, but the curl of his mouth betrayed the pleasure of a man about to destroy something fragile. His voice, when it rose to address the court, was smooth as oil poured on a blade. "Honored council," he began, "I come before you not as a lord seeking favor, but as a guardian burdened by shame. The girl before you, my niece, has forgotten her place. If that wrestler—" A low murmur rippled through the chamber, a living thing that slithered between pillars and over-polished stone. The words Omega and ungrateful floated above the rest, brittle and sharp. Ava's throat constricted. She wanted to fold herself into nothing, but even that mercy was denied her. Marcus continued, letting false sorrow paint his tone. "I took her into my household after the tragic death of my brother and his wife. May their spirits run forever in the moonlight. I offered her protection, education, a roof, yet she repaid my generosity with deceit. A suitor of good standing, a respectable beta from the Holloway pack, was kind enough to seek her hand. I encouraged the match. And what did she do? She led the man astray, whispered false promises, then scorned him before my household. The lie struck like a whip." Ava's hands clenched at her sides. The truth was simpler and crueler. Marcus's chosen suitor had been a leering brute who tried to corner her in the dark. She had fled. That was her crime. Her silence made her guilty. "She embarrassed the Vale name," Marcus said, each syllable carefully measured. "She made a fool of a valued ally. Such behavior cannot be tolerated, lest others believe that low-born blood may mock the order of our kind." The crowd murmured its approval. The sound rose like the hiss of a great serpent. Ava's gaze dropped to the floor, to the single crack that ran through one of the granite tiles, a thin dark vein cutting across perfection. She fixed on it. The stone at least did not look back at her. "Is it true," a voice from the benches asked, "that she bewitched him?" Marcus allowed a delicate pause, savoring it. "I do not claim sorcery, only manipulation, a woman's weapon when all else fails." Laughter followed, rough and cruel. It scraped against the edges of the hall until even the banners seemed to flinch. Ava bit the inside of her cheek hard enough to taste blood. She would not cry. The one thing Marcus could never stand was her silence. She would give him that and nothing more. "Speak, girl." His voice cut through the noise. "Do you deny it?" Ava kept her eyes on the crack in the stone. Her tongue felt like iron in her mouth. She shook her head once, neither yes nor no, only refusal. The air shifted. Marcus's tone hardened. "Look at me when I speak to you." Still, she did not raise her eyes. The next moment unfolded like the snap of a bowstring. His hand shot forward, fingers clamping around her jaw, forcing her chin upward. His grip was a vice. "Look at me," he hissed. "Do not hide behind that meek act of yours." Gasps rippled across the chamber, but no one moved. This was not Mercy's court. Pain flared where his fingers dug into bone. She tasted humiliation, bitter as rust. "Answer me!" Her heart hammered, but her voice would not come. The hall seemed to tilt. She could feel every pair of eyes drinking in the spectacle. Her silence was defiance, and defiance was a sin that demanded punishment. Marcus's face twisted into something raw and ugly. "You will not shame me again," he growled, and then his hand moved in a blur. The slap cracked through the hall like a thunderclap. White heat exploded across Ava's cheek. The force of it sent her staggering a half-step backward, but she caught herself before she fell. The world rang with the sound of that single strike. Her vision blurred. The scent of her own blood rose, metallic and sharp. And then silence. It was absolute. The crowd froze. Even the torches seemed to hold their breath. Ava's skin burned. Her head bowed beneath the weight of so many stares. The echo of the blow shivered through the stone floor and up into her bones. Then, from the dais, came a sound she had never heard before, a low, rolling growl that seemed to rise from the foundation of the castle itself. It was not human. It was a promise of death. The air thickened with the scent of storm and iron. Every head turned toward the throne. The Alpha King had moved. Ava felt it before she saw it, the sudden shift in the hall's gravity, the invisible pull that bent everything toward the dais. She lifted her gaze without meaning to, drawn by something primal. The man seated on the throne was a study in restrained fury. Lucian, the Alpha King, leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. The shadows loved him, clinging to his shoulders like a cloak. His hair was dark as ink, his skin marked by the faint silver sheen that only old blood carried. And his eyes, those eyes were molten amber, burning with a light that did not belong to any mortal creature. When he spoke, his voice was low, quiet enough that the silence had to lean closer to hear. You will never touch her again. The words did not echo. They did not need to. They settled over the hall like a command carved into stone. Marcus froze, his fingers still hovering in the air as though the command had turned his tendons to iron. Color drained from his face. Your Majesty. Lucian rose from the throne. The movement was unhurried, deliberate, a predator unfolding to its full height. He descended the dais steps, each one slow and heavy, the sound of his boots a metronome of impending ruin. The crowd parted instinctively, creating a path without being told. Even the air seemed to flinch away from him. When he stopped, he stood only a few feet from Marcus, the difference between life and death measured in heartbeats. I will not repeat myself, Lucian said. His tone was almost gentle, which made it far worse. Lay another hand on her, and I will take that hand from you. It's mock. Marcus's mouth opened, but no sound came. His jaw worked uselessly, his eyes darting from the king to the council, seeking someone, anyone, to intervene. None did. Lucian turned his gaze to Ava, and for the first time she saw him clearly. His presence was overwhelming, too vast for the confines of the hall. The light caught the edge of his jaw, the curve of a scar that traced from his temple down toward the collar of his dark uniform. He was all sharpness and command, but behind the fury was something stranger, a flicker of recognition, as if he were seeing a ghost. Ava's breath caught. Her body betrayed her with a tremor that was not entirely fear. Something ancient stirred in the pit of her stomach, an answering hum that made her pulse stumble. For an instant, she forgot the ache in her cheek, the crowd, even Marcus's trembling form. There was only the weight of Lucian's gaze, hot and unyielding. The silence stretched until it became unbearable. Then Lucian spoke again, this time to the assembled council. This trial is over. The declaration rippled outward, erasing every whisper before it began. He looked once more at Marcus. The girl will no longer fall under your care. From this moment, she is under mine. The words struck like lightning, their meaning too large to grasp all at once. Ava's knees threatened to give way. She swayed slightly, the world narrowing to the steady thrum of her heartbeat. Marcus found his voice thin and desperate. Your Majesty, this is highly irregular. Lucian's head tilted just enough to silence him. Do you wish to challenge my word, Lord Vale? No, Your Majesty. Good. The king turned away, dismissing him as easily as one might swat an insect. To the guards stationed by the walls, he said, escort Lord Vale from this hall, and ensure that his tongue remembers silence. If now... 2 guards stepped forward. Marcus's protest dissolved into air as they seized his arms and led him out. The great doors closed behind him with a resonant boom that shook the banners overhead. When the echo faded, all eyes returned to Ava. She felt the collective stare like heat against her skin. The murmurs began again, this time hushed, disbelieving, fearful. An Omega claimed by the Alpha King. It was unthinkable. Lucian stood in the center of the hall, his back to her. What is your name? He asked, without turning. Ava Thorne, she managed, her voice barely more than a whisper. Lucian's shoulders shifted, a breath she could not read. Then he faced her again, and the force of his gaze pinned her where she stood. "You will leave this place with my guard," he said. "You will not return to Lord Vale's house." She nodded, the motion jerky. "Good." His eyes lingered on her for a heartbeat longer, searching for something she could not name. Then he spoke to the chamber at large. "This assembly is dismissed." The alphas and betas rose as one, bowing low as he passed. The sound of his boots on the stone floor followed her into the hollow places of her mind, where it would echo for the rest of her life. Ava stood alone for a moment, still trembling, the imprint of Marcus's hand fading from her skin, even as the memory of it burned deeper. Somewhere within her chest, beneath the fear and confusion, something else took root, a fragile spark that did not yet have a name. As the guards approached to escort her, she turned one last time toward the dais. Lucian had already gone, the throne empty. But the air still hummed with his presence, heavy and electric, as though the walls themselves remembered his voice. Ava did not know what fate awaited her beyond the great doors, but she understood one thing with absolute clarity. The cage she had lived in her whole life had shattered, and what waited beyond its broken bars was not freedom, it was the Alpha King. The silence that followed the blow was not absence of sound, it was a living thing, a cold beast with invisible teeth. It clung to the high arches of the court and to the gathered wolves who did not breathe, as though the air itself had been forbidden to move. Ava Thorne stood at the center of it all, her cheek a raw, burning brand where Lord Marcus Vale's hand had struck. Her heart beat in frantic, uneven spasms, each one echoing the disbelief that filled her chest. The silence broke. Not with words, but with a sound that rose from the marble beneath her feet. A deep, resonant vibration that trembled through the stone columns and crawled up her spine. It was a growl, low and thunderous, a sound that belonged to something far older than language. The temperature of the room dropped, and every wolf in attendance seemed to stiffen, the beast within them reacting to the voice of dominance that rolled across the hall like distant thunder. Ava's head turned toward the dais despite herself. She saw the throne again, massive and carved from a single slab of obsidian. The man upon it, the Alpha King, was no longer sitting in composed indifference. Lucian had leaned forward, elbows braced on his knees, his eyes lit with the terrible gold of the beast awake. The hall's torches flickered, throwing restless shadows that seemed to pulse with his heartbeat. Every instinct in Ava screamed danger. Every part of her body wanted to run, but her feet refused to move. His gaze held her there, pinned as effectively as a wolf trap's iron teeth. It wasn't cruelty that lived in those eyes, now it was something even more primal. Possession, fury, recognition. Lord Marcus, realizing too late what he had done, froze. His lips parted, searching for words that would undo the moment, but none came. He stumbled back, the color draining from his face as Lucian rose to his feet. The sound of it, the scrape of metal and leather as the king moved, was somehow louder than the earlier slap. The Alpha King descended the dais steps, unhurried, yet each step carried the weight of a verdict. The other alphas lowered their heads instinctively. The strongest of them could not meet the eyes of a king whose wolf stood this close to the surface. Lucian did not speak as he crossed the hall. His presence spoke for him, a tide of raw dominance that crushed every sound beneath it. When he reached Marcus, he stopped. For a long heartbeat, neither man moved. Marcus bowed, trembling, the sweat already beating on his forehead. "Your Majesty," he managed, his voice cracking. "I meant no." Lucian's voice was quiet, but it cut through the hall like a blade. "You will never touch her again." The words were not shouted. They were pronounced with lethal calm, and that calm was worse than rage. It was a sentence, not a threat. Marcus stammered, "Your Majesty, she is my blood, my ward. I only sought to correct her." Lucian's hand shot out with terrifying speed, fisting the front of Marcus's tunic and hauling him up until their faces were inches apart. The Alpha King was taller, stronger, the very air bending around him. "You call that correction?" Lucian hissed. "You strike a woman in my court?" A ripple of unease passed through the spectators. Some turned away. Others stared enthralled. Lucian's control was legendary. Yet here he stood, trembling with barely leashed fury. His fingers tightened, and Marcus gasped for air. Ava could not look away. The scene unfolded with a terrible inevitability. The king's scent, pine, smoke, and storm rolled across the hall, hitting her senses with dizzying force. Her wolf, the small submissive part of her she had spent years silencing, stirred within her chest. It recognized something in him that her mind could not yet name. Lucian released Marcus, suddenly shoving him backward. The lord stumbled and fell to his knees, clutching at his throat, gasping. The Alpha King turned toward the council, his voice carrying the sharp edge of command. This farce ends now. Lord Vale's conduct dishonors not only his house but the crown. A murmur spread among the Alphas, but none dared object. Lucian's word was law, and the law was absolute. His gaze swung back to Ava, and the world tilted. For the first time, his fury softened only slightly, like the brief calm before a greater storm. He took one step closer, and she flinched, instinctively bowing her head. "Look at me," he said. She obeyed, though it took every ounce of will she possessed. Their eyes met. The bond that formed in that instant was invisible, but she felt it like the snap of a chain. No, not a chain. Something older, deeper. A pull between them that had no mercy in it. Lucian inhaled once, and his nostrils flared. Wolves could smell truth, emotion, destiny. Whatever he scented on her made his jaw tighten. "She is under my protection," he declared. "From this moment, Ava Thorne answers only to me." "All right." The hall erupted. Dozens of voices collided in disbelief. "An Omega?" someone hissed. "The Alpha King cannot claim one of them." Another voice rose, desperate. "It is against tradition." Lucian turned his head slightly, and the protest died mid-breath. His voice was soft but final. "Tradition bends to my will." He turned again to the guards standing at the far end of the hall. "Remove Lord Vale from my sight." Two of the king's soldiers stepped forward, heavy boots echoing. Marcus Vale tried to speak, his mouth opening and closing like a drowning man's. His eyes found Ava's, and what she saw there was not anger but hatred. Cold, pure hatred. "You think this saves you?" He spat as the guards seized his arms. "You think he protects you? He will destroy you. You'll see." The guards dragged him away. The great doors groaned open, then slammed shut behind them. The sound reverberated through the hall until it became silence once more. Lucian faced the assembly. His expression was unreadable now, the fury buried beneath a mask of regal composure. "The proceedings are concluded," he said. "Any who value their tongues will keep them still." He gestured toward Ava. "Bring her." A guard approached, his armor gleaming, and motioned for her to follow. Ava hesitated only a second before moving. Her steps were uncertain, the weight of so many eyes pressing down on her shoulders. She passed the rows of Alphas who now whispered behind their hands, words like madness and witchcraft and curse slipping through the air. She pretended not to hear. When she reached the foot of the dais, Lucian looked down at her. The distance between them was small, but it felt vast, filled with things neither could yet name. His eyes lingered on the red mark on her cheek. Something flickered there. Regret, perhaps, but it was gone before she could be sure. Without a word, he turned and walked toward a side passage. The guards fell in behind him, and Ava followed. The corridor beyond the hall was dim, lit only by torches that guttered in their sconces. The further they walked, the quieter the castle became, until all that remained was the echo of their footsteps. Lucian stopped before a massive door of dark wood bound with iron. He pushed it open, revealing a chamber that smelled faintly of leather and steel. A private room, not the king's throne hall, but something far more dangerous, his den. He motioned for the guards to leave. When the door closed, the silence between them grew taut. "You are trembling," he said. Ava straightened, her voice hoarse. "I am not." Lucian's mouth twitched. "Lying does not suit you." He studied her for a long moment. "You do not understand what happened in that hall, do you?" I understand that I have been taken from one cage to another, she said quietly. His gaze sharpened, but instead of anger, there was curiosity. Perhaps, but this cage, as you call it, keeps you alive. She looked up then, meeting his eyes again, and for a heartbeat, she saw the beast that lived behind them, a shadow of fur and fire that watched her with the patience of a hunter. Her breath caught. Why me? She whispered. Why protect me? Lucian's expression darkened, and for a moment he looked less like a man and more like the creature whose power pulsed beneath his skin. Because I could not bear the sight of him striking you, he said. Because something in me broke. He stepped closer. She could feel the heat of him now, the raw electric pulse of dominance that made her wolf bow even as she fought it. You are under my protection, Ava Thorne, he said again, his voice a low growl. Remember that. No one touches what is mine. The last word trembled between them. Mine. Ava's breath came shallow. Every rational thought screamed that this was madness, that she had traded one tormentor for another. But deep inside, beneath fear and confusion, something ancient stirred in answer to that word. Lucian seemed to sense it. His jaw tightened. Without another word, he turned away, his cloak sweeping behind him as he left her standing in the center of the room, her heart pounding, her world irrevocably altered. The door closed with a soft thud. Ava pressed her palm to her still burning cheek, her skin tingling where his gaze had lingered. Somewhere beyond the walls, the wind howled through the mountains. It sounded like a beast grieving or calling. She could not tell which. Whatever she had become in that hall, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. The Alpha King had claimed her, and the world she once knew was gone forever. The echo of the Alpha King's declaration still lived in the stone walls long after the great doors had closed. Ava Thorne sat in the corner of the carriage that bore her away from the court, her hands pressed together in her lap, trying to feel something that made sense. Outside, the mountains loomed like black teeth against the sky, and the horses' hooves struck sparks from the frozen road. Inside, the air smelled of leather and the faint smoke of pine resin, the scent that had clung to the Alpha King's cloak. Across from her sat the man himself, the king of wolves, the terror of every pack in the realm, Lucian. He did not speak, he had not spoken since they left the court. The darkness gathered around him the way water folds around a rock in a fast river, making space for him but never daring to touch. His eyes, when they flicked to her, were not cruel, but they were unreadable, and that was worse. The torches outside flashed across the glass window, cutting his face into fragments, jaw, mouth, the sharp plane of cheekbone, the glint of a scar she had not noticed before, running from the corner of his eye down to the hollow at his throat. Ava watched the scar because it was easier than meeting his eyes. Each time the wheel hit a rut, her shoulder brushed the wall of the carriage, and she fought the childish urge to flinch. Her uncle's voice still rang in her head. He will destroy you. Maybe he would. But Marcus had also said she was worthless, and the Alpha King's fury had proven at least one of those things wrong. The road curved upward. Snow fell in sudden, startled flurries, turning the world outside into a silver blur. Lucian shifted slightly, drawing back the curtain for a single glance toward the dark peaks. The muscles in his jaw flexed. "We will reach the fortress before dawn," he said at last. His voice was low, the sound of stone rolling beneath deep water. "You will rest there." Ava nodded, unsure if he wanted a response. He continued, "Until then, you will remain silent. Questions can wait." She bit the inside of her cheek. The taste of copper rose, a small reminder that she was still real. Her cheek still ached faintly from Marcus's blow, but it was nothing compared to the tightness in her chest, the kind that came when something too big had shifted inside you. The carriage jolted to a halt. Lucian leaned forward, opened the door, and the wind slammed inside, cutting through the warmth like a blade. "Out," he said. She obeyed. The cold hit her with shocking clarity. The world outside was made of stone and shadow. The fortress crouched against the mountain, its towers climbing into the night like black spears. Torches burned in iron sconces, their light golden against the storm-gray stone. The scent of wolves hung in the air, fur, smoke, and the faint metallic tang of dominance. Guards flanked the great doors, each man huge and silent, their eyes following her as though she were a creature from a strange land. Lucian did not look back to see if she followed. He knew she would. She climbed the steps after him, each footfall echoing in the vastness of the courtyard. Inside, the fortress was colder than the night. The hall they entered was wide enough to swallow a village. Columns rose like the trunks of petrified trees, and between them hung banners bearing the sigil of the Alpha King, a wolf's head wreathed in fire. The stone floors reflected the light of braziers set along the walls. Servants moved in the background, quick and silent, vanishing down side corridors before she could see their faces. Lucian's voice carried easily through the hall. "This is my home," he said without turning. "You will be safe here." The word safe sounded strange on his tongue, as if he were trying it for the first time. Ava followed him through a maze of staircases and passageways. The walls sweated with the cold of centuries. At last they reached a door carved with the same wolf's head emblem, its eyes inlaid with amber. Lucian pushed it open. The room beyond glowed with firelight. A great hearth roared on one side, and a bed piled high with furs dominated the center. There were shelves of books, a carved desk, and a balcony that opened onto a sheer drop into darkness. It was beautiful in a way that made her heart ache, too rich, too grand, and utterly unfamiliar. Lucian stepped aside. "You will stay here." "It's you." Ava hesitated on the threshold. "Here?" His eyes flicked toward her, golden even in the firelight. "You would prefer the dungeons?" "No," she said quickly. "Then here." He crossed to the fireplace, resting one hand on the mantel. "The servants will bring you food and clothing. You are not to leave these rooms without my permission." She stared at him, searching for the edges of the trap. "So I am your prisoner." Lucian's head tilted. "There is little difference between prisoner and protected," he said quietly. "The difference lies in what waits beyond the door." The flames threw shadows across his face, carving him into something both mortal and mythic. Ava wanted to look away, but could not. "Why do this?" she whispered. "Why take me from him?" Lucian's mouth curved, though it was not a smile. "Because no one lays a hand on what stands beneath my roof." And because he stopped, frowning slightly as though the rest of the thought refused to form itself. "Because the moment he struck you, I smelled blood that was not meant to be spilled. It woke something I had long buried." He turned then, his gaze spearing through her. "Do you know what they call me, Ava Thorne?" She nodded. "The Savage King." He let the title hang between them for a moment, then said, "Savage things do not act without reason. I saved you because reason demanded it. But understand this." He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him, the faint electric hum of his power. "In this fortress, my word is law. Disobey it, and no one will find what is left of you." Her breath caught. "You mean to frighten me?" His eyes softened just a fraction. "If fear keeps you alive, then yes." He moved past her toward the door. As he reached it, he paused, speaking without turning. "Eat, sleep. Tomorrow we will talk. If this country's is anyone true off on." The door shut with a deep, resonant sound, and the latch fell into place. Ava stood alone in the golden quiet. The fire popped, sending up a plume of sparks that shimmered like dying stars. She crossed to the window. Beyond the glass, the world dropped away into nothingness, the forest below swallowed by mist. She pressed her palm against the cold glass. The surface reflected a ghost of her face, pale, eyes too wide, hair tangled by the wind. Somewhere beyond the reflection, the Alpha King walked his halls, a storm contained within a man's skin. She sank onto the edge of the bed. The furs were impossibly soft, and they smelled faintly of pine and smoke, the scent that was already becoming him. She tried not to breathe it in, but failed. Her mind turned to Marcus, to the hatred in his eyes when the guards dragged him away. He would not forgive humiliation. He would wait, he would plot, and one day he would come for her again. Yet even that fear seemed distant compared to the heavy awareness that pressed against her ribs, the knowledge that her fate now belonged to the Alpha King. Ava lay back on the bed, staring at the flicker of firelight across the ceiling. The flames danced like memories she could not catch. Her eyelids grew heavy. Sleep came, but it was not the soft kind she remembered from childhood. It was thick and dreamless, like sinking into deep water. Sometime in the night, she stirred. The fire had burned low. In the darkness, the air hummed faintly, a vibration more felt than heard. A whisper brushed her ear, not from the door or the window, but from inside her own mind. A voice, low and ancient, female and ageless, like the moon speaking through silver clouds. "The savage heart can be tamed," it murmured, "but only by the one who shares its blood." Ava jerked upright, her heart hammering. The room was empty, only the soft hiss of embers breaking the silence. Yet the words lingered, coiling through her thoughts like smoke. She drew her knees to her chest, staring into the dying fire. Outside, the wind moaned around the towers, and somewhere deep within the fortress, she thought she heard a wolf howl. When dawn came, pale light creeping across the floor, Ava was still awake. She had crossed from one cage into another, but this one glittered with gold and flame, and somewhere within it a beast waited, wearing the face of a king. The journey up the mountain felt endless. The narrow road curved along the cliffside, climbing higher into the realm where wind and cloud had no mercy. Ava Thorne sat in silence inside the carriage, her fingers gripping the edge of the seat each time a wheel hit a rut. The driver's whip cracked, the horses grunted, and the world outside became a blur of snow and shadow. Opposite her, the Alpha King was carved from stillness. Lucian sat with one arm braced on the window ledge, his golden eyes fixed on the darkness beyond the glass. Every flicker of light from the lantern outside caught the hard edge of his profile, cheekbone, jaw, mouth, and turned him into something that could have been shaped by the gods when they were angry. He had not spoken since they left the last village, nor had he glanced at her. Ava told herself she was grateful for that, though she was not sure she believed it. She had imagined what a king's domain would be like, but the fortress that loomed above them as dawn bled into the sky was not what she expected. It rose directly from the mountain's spine, its towers dark against the gray light, its walls vast and jagged like frozen waves. The banners that hung from the highest parapets bore the mark of his house, a wolf's head wrought in crimson thread. They stirred faintly in the wind, whispering of oaths and blood. When the carriage halted, Lucian was already moving. He stepped out first, the cold wind tangling in his dark hair. Ava followed, the breath snatched from her lungs by the sight before her. The courtyard was immense, lined with pillars that bore torches burning with blue fire. The scent of pine and frost filled the air. Soldiers moved like shadows, their armor black and unadorned, the symbol of the Alpha King stamped over their hearts. Lucian turned to her, his voice cutting through the hiss of wind. "Welcome to the palace," he said, though there was nothing welcoming about it. "Remember this place, Ava Thorne. Few who enter leave the same." She nodded, her pulse unsteady. The guards saluted as he passed, lowering their eyes. No one looked at her directly, but she felt their curiosity pressing against her skin like invisible hands. Inside, the fortress was even colder. The air smelled faintly of iron and cedar. The walls were bare stone, carved with faint reliefs of wolves and moons, so ancient that the carvings had nearly been worn smooth. Long tapestries hung between the arches, their threads depicting battles from centuries past, men and beasts, claws and crowns, victories written in crimson dye. Lucian led her through corridors that twisted like veins, past rooms whose doors were carved with runes she did not understand. They climbed a wide staircase lit by narrow windows, each pane of glass streaked with frost. At the top, a pair of massive doors waited, their hinges etched with silver. He pushed them open with a single hand, and she stepped into a world that stole her breath. The chamber was immense, circular, its domed ceiling rising so high it disappeared into shadow. A massive hearth dominated one wall, flames crackling around logs that glowed like molten rock. The light painted the space in gold and crimson, glinting off weapons mounted on the walls and the delicate curve of glass vials that lined a nearby table. Furs layered the floor in dark, rich colors. In the center stood a bed large enough to hold a small army, its frame carved from black wood, draped in sheets of soft linen and wolf pelts. "This is where you will stay," Lucian said. His voice was neither kind nor cruel, merely absolute. Ava turned in slow disbelief. This room. She could not find words for it. It was beauty shaped by violence, comfort edged with power. Why here? Lucian moved toward the hearth, resting his hand against the stone mantle. The firelight danced across his face. "Because here no one will dare touch you, and because I wish to see you alive when the sun rises." A shiver slid down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold. "You mean to protect me," she said softly. "But from whom?" His golden gaze flicked toward her, bright and unrelenting. "From everyone, from the court, from your uncle, from the wolves who would tear you apart just to spite me." He paused, the corner of his mouth hardening. "And perhaps from myself." She took a hesitant step forward. "Then why bring me here at all?" Lucian's eyes narrowed, and the room seemed to shrink under his scrutiny. "Because you forced my hand." "I did nothing." Exactly." His voice deepened, low and dangerous. "You stood there while he raised his hand to you, and the court watched as though it were theater. You should have cried or begged or fought, but you did not. You were silent, and something in me broke." Ava's breath caught. "That is not reason." "No," he said, turning away. "It is instinct, and instincts make fools of kings." For a long moment, only the fire spoke. Its crackle filled the silence between them, sparks rising toward the vaulted ceiling before dying into ash. Lucian's next words were quieter. "You will stay in this chamber. You will eat, sleep, and keep to yourself. Do not wander beyond these doors without my leave. There are things in this palace older and less forgiving than I am." Ava wanted to ask what he meant, but the look in his eyes silenced her. She nodded. Lucian crossed the room, stopping just before her. Up close, he was taller than she remembered, the scent of him stronger pine and cold air, and something darker beneath it. "I will have clothing brought for you," he said. "And food. You will find no chains here, but do not mistake that for freedom." He brushed past her toward the door, his voice dropping as he spoke the last words. "The wolves in these halls can smell weakness. If they sense fear on you, they will not hesitate." What? When the door closed behind him, the sound echoed through the chamber like the final toll of a bell. Ava stood alone, staring into the flames. The warmth could not reach the places in her that had gone cold. She moved toward the balcony doors, pushing them open just enough to step into the night. The wind hit her immediately, sharp and clean. Below, the forest spread out in endless waves of black and silver. The moon hung low, heavy and bright. For the first time, she understood the scale of what had happened. She was no longer a servant's orphan niece. She was the ward or prisoner of the Alpha King. The world she had known had vanished. The mountains, the forest, even the sky itself felt foreign now, part of a story she did not yet belong to. She turned back into the room. The fire burned low. Shadows stretched across the floor, long and hungry. Her fingers brushed the fur blanket on the bed. It was softer than anything she had ever touched. She lay down without meaning to, exhaustion pressing her eyes shut before she could think. Dreams found her quickly. They came in fragments. Her mother's voice calling through smoke. Her father's hand reaching the howl of wolves under a blood-red moon. In the midst of it stood Lucian, his eyes alight with that terrible, beautiful fire. He reached for her, but his touch left a mark of flame on her wrist. When she woke, the moon had moved, and her heart beat so hard she could feel it in her throat. The mark was still there, faint, almost invisible, a single line of warmth beneath her skin where his fingers had brushed her earlier that evening. She pressed her palm over it and closed her eyes. Somewhere deep in the fortress, a bell tolled, low and mournful. The sound rolled through the stone like a heartbeat. Ava turned toward the fire and whispered to herself, though she did not know why. Safe or not, she said softly. A cage is still a cage. The wind answered with a low moan that might have been the howl of a wolf, and she could not tell whether it came from the mountains outside or from the beast that ruled the palace of shadow and bone. Days blurred into one another, measured not by the sun, its light seldom reached this far into the mountains, but by the slow rhythm of torches being lit and extinguished. The fortress was a world unto itself, carved from the bones of the mountain, suspended between sky and shadow. Ava Thorne lived within its quiet like a ghost, moving from window to window, tracing the paths of light that the moon left on the cold stone floors. The Alpha King had given her no orders beyond silence and obedience, and so she obeyed. Servants came and went with food, with gowns of dark silk and velvet that fit her too well to have been guessed at. They never met her eyes, never spoke. The only sound they made was the faint rustle of fabric and the click of the door closing behind them. Each night she dreamed of wolves. Sometimes they ran beneath a bleeding sky. Sometimes they stood at the edge of a forest, watching her with eyes like molten gold. Each time she woke with the echo of howling in her chest, as if the sound had been pulled from her own lungs. Lucian did not visit her for 3 days. When at last she saw him again, it was only from a distance. The door to her chambers had been left open by mistake, and she had stepped into the corridor, meaning only to call for the guard who stood there. Instead, she saw him. He was descending the stairs at the far end of the hall, surrounded by his generals. Even from that distance, his presence filled the air, bending it around him. The men who followed him, all strong alphas in their own right, walked half a step behind, their heads bowed. He did not see her, or if he did, he pretended not to. Ava slipped back into her room, her pulse racing for reasons she could not explain. That night, sleep refused to come. The fire burned low in the hearth, painting the walls with restless gold. She wrapped herself in a fur cloak and stepped out onto the balcony. The wind carried the scent of pine and snow, and beneath it, faint but unmistakable, the musk of wolves. Somewhere in the forest below, one of them howled a sound so lonely it made her chest ache. She leaned against the railing, closing her eyes, and for one wild, unguarded moment, she imagined that she could answer. A voice broke the quiet behind her. You should not be here alone. Ava turned sharply. A man stood just inside the doorway of her chambers. He was not a guard. His hair was the pale silver of frost, his clothes immaculate, his smile sharp. I did not mean to startle you, he said, bowing with exaggerated grace. Lord Connor Blake at your service. Ava stepped back, the railing cold against her palms. I did not summon anyone. He laughed softly. And yet here I am. The King's court is not large these days, Lady Thorne. Word travels fast when the Alpha King brings an Omega into his fortress. I am no lady, she said quietly. No? His eyes swept over her, lingering where they shouldn't. You look the part to me. He took a step closer, and the easy smile that had seemed charming moments ago turned into something else. Tell me, what spell did you cast to win his favor? The Alpha King is not known for his charity. Ava's heart pounded. You should leave. Connor's smile widened. Come now. There is no need for fear. I am only curious. He reached out, his fingers brushing the edge of her sleeve. Surely he tires of you already. Men like him always do. She jerked away, her voice sharp with panic. Do not touch me. Before the words had finished leaving her mouth, the air in the room changed. The fire guttered, its flame shrinking as if something enormous had drawn all the oxygen from the air. Connor froze, his hand still half extended. A low growl rolled through the chamber, so deep it seemed to rise from the stones themselves. Ava turned. Lucian stood in the doorway. He looked nothing like the man she had seen in the court. His dark hair was damp with sweat, his eyes burning with a feral light that made the torches flicker. The muscles in his jaw worked as though it took everything in him not to bare his teeth. Do not touch her. The words were almost unrecognizable, warped by the growl that lived beneath them. Connor's face went pale. Your Majesty, he began, but he got no further. Lucian crossed the room in 3 strides, his hand closing around the front of Connor's tunic. The force of it lifted the smaller man off his feet and slammed him against the bookshelf hard enough to send volumes tumbling to the floor. The sound echoed like thunder. "Lucian, stop!" Ava cried. He didn't. The beast inside him had broken free. His eyes had gone almost entirely amber, the pupils stretched to narrow slits. The veins along his neck stood out like cords. The air around him crackled, charged with the energy of barely restrained violence. Connor struggled, choking, his hands clawing at the king's wrist. Lucian's snarl deepened. His other hand rose, fingers curling into claws that gleamed faintly in the firelight. For one horrifying moment, Ava thought he would rip the man apart. "Lucian!" she shouted again. The sound of his name cut through the rage like a blade. The Alpha King's head snapped toward her, his expression wild and lost. She saw the battle taking place behind his eyes, the man and the beast, fighting for control. "Please," she whispered. "Stop." Lucian's hand trembled, his breath came in ragged bursts. And then, with a sound that was half snarl, half choked groan, he flung Connor aside. The Lord crashed to the ground, scrambling backward until he found his feet. His elegant mask was gone, replaced by naked terror. "Get out!" Lucian growled. Connor fled without another word, nearly tripping over the threshold in his haste. The door slammed behind him, the echo reverberating through the stone. Lucian stood in the center of the room, his chest heaving, the glow in his eyes slowly dimming. He looked down at his hands as though seeing them for the first time, the faint trace of claws retreating back into skin. Ava took a cautious step forward. "Are you all right?" He gave a short, bitter laugh. "I should be asking you that." His voice was rough, strained. "I warned you not to wander." "I did not," she said quickly. "He came to me." Lucian closed his eyes, his jaw tightening. "Then it seems I was right to keep you close." He turned toward the window, bracing his hands on the stone sill. "Do you see what I am, Ava? You call me king, but what you saw just now was not a man. It was the beast beneath the crown." Ava hesitated. "You stopped yourself." He shook his head. "Because you spoke. If you had not," he exhaled, the sound harsh. "If you had not, I would have killed him." The firelight flickered across his face, revealing the anguish there. Ava moved to stand beside him, though every instinct told her to keep her distance. "You saved me," she said quietly. "I endangered you," he replied. "Do not mistake one for the other." The wind moaned outside, carrying with it the faint sound of howling. Lucian's eyes followed it to the horizon, where the moon hung low and red. "There is a part of me that is always waiting," he said, more to himself than to her, waiting for the cage to break. Ava looked at him then, not as a king, but as a man. "Then let me help you keep it closed." He turned to her, his expression unreadable. For a moment, neither spoke. The air between them hummed with something that was not entirely fear. Then Lucian took a step back, putting distance between them, as if the closeness itself were dangerous. "You do not understand what you are offering," he said softly. "If I ever lose control, no one will be able to save you. Not even me." "Perhaps," she said, "but if you never try to be saved, you will always be lost." Lucian stared at her, the faintest hint of a smile ghosting across his mouth, sad, disbelieving. "You are a foolish woman, Ava Thorne." "Maybe," she said, "but I am still here." "Why?" He looked away first. "Sleep if you can. I will make sure Lord Blake leaves the palace before dawn." When he was gone, Ava sank to the floor beside the hearth. Her body trembled with the aftermath of what she had seen, but beneath the fear there was something else, a strange calm, as if the chaos had carved out a space within her where certainty could live. She stared into the fire until the flames blurred and her eyes burned. Somewhere deep in the fortress, a wolf howled again, and this time she did not flinch. The sound no longer felt like a threat. It felt like a call, and though she did not understand it yet, she knew it was meant for her. The fortress of the Alpha King had its own heartbeat. Ava Thorne heard it in the quiet hours before dawn, when the torches guttered and the halls exhaled a sigh too human to be wind. The walls groaned softly as though remembering. The stones here were old, older than any throne, older than the crown Lucian wore. Sometimes, in the stillness, she thought they were speaking. She had not seen the king since the night he nearly tore Lord Connor Blake apart. He had vanished into the deeper chambers of the palace, where war councils met, and wolves with silvered hair whispered of borders and blood. His absence left a strange silence behind, one that pressed against Ava's chest and made her restless. The servants still came and went like shadows. They left food, replaced the logs in the hearth, smoothed her sheets, and disappeared before she could open her mouth. Even when she tried to speak, the words died on her tongue. It was as if the walls themselves listened, waiting for secrets. By the third day, she could no longer bear it. The room was a cage no matter how soft the furs, no matter how warm the fire. She needed to move. The corridor outside her chamber was empty. The guards who usually flanked her door were gone. For a long moment, Ava hesitated, one hand resting on the iron latch. He told you not to leave. But the stillness had become unbearable. Whatever waited beyond that door could not be worse than what waited in her mind. The door opened without a sound. The corridor stretched ahead in twin rows of torches, each flame trembling in an unseen breeze. The light painted the stone in amber and gold, and the floor was so polished it reflected the fire like liquid. Ava walked slowly, her footsteps small, her breath shallow. She kept her fingers grazing the wall, as if the stone itself could guide her. The palace was a labyrinth. Every hallway looked the same until it didn't. Subtle changes in the carvings, in the way the torches burned lower, in how the air grew cooler and thicker the farther she went. She passed a gallery lined with ancient portraits, stern-faced kings and queens, their eyes following her as she moved. The faces grew darker as the portraits aged, the colors bleeding into shadow until the final canvas showed only a figure of smoke wearing a crown of bone. She looked away quickly. Somewhere behind her, something whispered. Ava turned, her heart jerking in her chest. The hallway was empty. The flames in the sconces flickered as though disturbed by breath. She told herself she was imagining it. The palace was vast, sounds carried strangely through stone. She continued, but now the air felt different, denser, heavier, humming faintly like the moment before lightning strikes. Then she heard it again. The curse will claim him. The words were soft, a sigh that seemed to come from the walls themselves. Ava froze. Who's there? Her voice echoed too loud. Silence? She stepped backward, eyes darting along the corridor. The carvings in the walls seemed to shift with the shadows. Wolves, moons, and twisting runes writhed in the flickering light. Show yourself, she whispered. The answer came as another breath against her ear. Blood will tell. Ava stumbled, her shoulders striking the cold wall. Her pulse hammered. Stop, she said. Please. The voices did not stop. They multiplied. A chorus of whispers overlapping in tones that were neither male nor female. Betrayed. The beast sleeps. The throne rots. The words slid through the air like silk threads, brushing against her skin. She pressed her palms to her ears, but it did nothing. The whispers came from inside the stone, from the very bones of the palace. Panic surged up her throat. She turned and fled down the hall, her soft slippers silent against the floor. The corridors twisted, unfamiliar. She passed doors that were slightly ajar, glimpsing only fragments within an empty armory, a long table set for no one, a staircase that led down into darkness. The whispers followed her. Run, little wolf, run before the stones drink your blood. Her breath came fast, white in the cold air. She rounded a corner and nearly collided with a wall of oak carved in spirals of moonlight and claws. The doors were half open, just enough for her to see the glow of candles beyond. Curiosity, foolish and bright, overrode her fear. She stepped closer. Inside was a vast chamber she had never seen before. A circular table of black stone occupied the center, its surface etched with maps and symbols. 3 men stood around it, their heads bent together. She recognized 2 of them from the trial in the Great Hall, lords of powerful packs, men who had bowed to Lucian with their mouths and cursed him with their eyes. The third was older, his hair white, his expression grave. Ava's heart pounded as she pressed herself against the gap in the door. This cannot go on, said the oldest lord, Lord Grant Holloway, if she remembered correctly. His voice was low, his tone sharp. He is losing control. The beast surfaces more each day. Did you not see what he did to Connor? The second whispered. He nearly tore out his throat in front of a witness. His instability grows worse, Holloway agreed. The curse eats at him. The beast was meant to sleep, not rule. Look. The third man, the one Ava did not recognize, spoke next, his voice smooth and cold. If the Alpha King falls, so does the kingdom. The packs will turn on each other. The only way to save the realm is to remove him. Remove? Holloway echoed. You mean kill him? The stranger's smile was like the edge of a blade. I mean, replace him. The old laws permitted a challenge for the throne. Let one of us claim it before the curse consumes us all. Ava's hand covered her mouth to smother a gasp. A challenge, a fight to the death. They were plotting treason. Her thoughts raced. She should flee, warn Lucian, but the very idea of running through those empty corridors made her throat close. The whispers had fallen silent, as though the walls themselves were listening now. Holloway hesitated. And if the beast wins? Then the beast dies with him, the stranger said simply. The men began to gather their parchments, the meeting ending as swiftly as it had begun. Ava slipped back from the door, her pulse roaring in her ears. She turned to retreat, but something cold brushed her arm. She looked down. The wall beside her was sweating condensation. Only when she wiped it away, it wasn't water. It was blood-thin, dark, seeping from the cracks between the stones. She stumbled back with a strangled cry. The whispers returned. Louder now, urgent. The moon will rise. The king will fall. Run, child of dust, run. Ava fled. She didn't know how long she ran or how she found her way back. The corridors twisted, the walls closed in, and when at last she burst through the door of her chamber, she slammed it shut behind her and pressed her back to it, gasping. The whispers died at once, as if they had reached an invisible line they could not cross. The fire in the hearth was almost out. The last embers glowed a dull red. She crossed the room, feeding logs into the flames with shaking hands until the light returned. Her reflection wavered in the window pane, pale, frightened, her eyes too wide. You're imagining things, she told herself. It's the cold, the isolation, the fear. But she knew it wasn't true. The whispers had been real. And what she had heard in that chamber had been no ghost story. It was treason. She sank into the nearest chair, pulling the fur cloak around her shoulders. The fire crackled, but its warmth barely touched her. If Lucian knew what they plotted, he showed no sign. Yet the whispers in the stone had given her something she had not asked for. Knowledge. And with it, a terrible choice. She could stay silent and live, or speak and risk the wrath of the beast she had begun to pity. The flames shifted, the logs collapsing with a soft sigh. Ava stared into the heart of the fire until her eyes blurred and her pulse slowed. Far below, in the guts of the fortress, something groaned, a deep, ancient sound that might have been the mountain itself. The whispers rose again, faint and fading, threading through the crackle of the fire. He is not the only one cursed. Ava shivered. She did not sleep at all that night. Morning came late to the fortress, as though the sun itself hesitated to trespass upon the Alpha King's domain. When the light finally filtered through the narrow windows, it touched nothing warmly. It only revealed what the darkness had hidden, the frost crawling up the glass, the faint red stain of wax on the table, the way Ava Thorne's hands trembled as she braided her hair. She had not slept. The whispers in the stone still lingered in her mind, 1,000 ghostly breaths threading through her thoughts. Even now, if she stood very still, she could almost hear them again. The curse will claim him. The words clung to her like smoke. When the knock came, she jumped. Enter, she said, her voice small in the cavernous silence. The door opened, and the Alpha King stepped inside. Lucian filled the doorway like a shadow given flesh tall, broad, the faint sheen of early frost on his shoulders where snow had melted. He wore black from throat to boots, the collar of his coat trimmed with wolf fur so dark it seemed to swallow the light. "Your guards tell me you left your chambers last night," he said without preamble. His voice was calm, but beneath it lay the low hum of restrained power. "I told you not to wander." Ava's mouth went dry. "I needed air." "Air?" His brow lifted slightly. "You live in a fortress on the spine of a mountain, Ava. The air here bites, it does not comfort." She flinched at the sound of her name on his tongue. "I am not your prisoner." Lucian's eyes narrowed. "No, you are not. If you were, I would have locked the door." He stepped farther into the room, and the scent of him pine steel, the faint musk of wolf reached her before his shadow did. "Tell me what you saw." The question caught her off guard. "What I saw?" He studied her face, his gaze sharp enough to draw blood. "Do not lie to me. You went somewhere you should not have gone." Ava hesitated, then decided there was no point in denial. "I heard voices," she said softly. "They led me down the corridor. I found a room, men speaking of you, of the curse." Lucian stilled. The air thickened, heavy with the weight of the word curse. "What men?" "Lord Holloway," she said, and his jaw tightened at once. "Two others. They said you are losing control, that they plan to challenge you for the throne." For a long moment he did not move. Then he turned away, pacing to the window. His reflection glimmered faintly in the frost-silvered glass. "Of course they did," he murmured. "Ambition breeds fastest in fear." "You believe me?" she asked. "I believe in treachery," he said flatly, "and I believe that those men would rather slit my throat than kneel again." He turned back to her, his eyes unreadable. "What I do not believe is that you found this chamber by accident." The accusation stung. "You think I sought them out?" "I think someone led you there, perhaps not the living." Ava's breath caught. "The whispers," she said. "You've heard them too." "Even no, whoa." Lucian's silence was answer enough. "They're not madness," she continued, stepping closer. "The walls, they speak. They warned me. They said the curse would claim you." Lucian laughed then, but it was a low, humorless sound. "Do you know what that curse is, Ava Thorne? It is not a phantom whispering in the dark. It is blood. It is legacy. Every Alpha King since the first has carried it, the beast that waits behind the crown." "The beast I saw in you," she said. His eyes flicked to hers, sharp and dangerous. "You think you understand what you saw?" "I think I understand pain when I see it." The words struck something in him. He turned away again, gripping the edge of the window frame. The muscles in his back tensed beneath the black fabric. "You should forget what you heard," he said. "Do not speak of it again. Do not speak to anyone." "I am trying to help you," she said quietly. "I do not need your help." The finality in his tone left no space for argument. Ava swallowed, her hands curling into fists at her sides. "You brought me here," she said. "You said I would be safe. If that was a lie, tell me now." Lucian's gaze snapped to her. The force of it made her take a step back. "You are safe from them," he said. "Not from me." Something broke in her. Then not fear, not anger, but a cold clarity. "Then what am I to you?" she asked. "A distraction? A symbol? A toy for the court to whisper about?" Lucian moved so quickly she barely saw it. One heartbeat he stood across the room, the next he was before her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "You are under my protection," he said. "Protection is not ownership." His hand came up, hovering near her face, fingers trembling with the effort of restraint. "You do not understand what you are asking of me." "Then explain it," she whispered. He stared at her for a long moment, then dropped his hand. "There is nothing to explain." He stepped back. "You will remain here until I say otherwise. That is all you need to know." He turned and left before she could speak again. The door shut hard enough to make the fire jump in the hearth. Ava stood where he had left her, her pulse pounding. The conversation replayed in her mind, his words and the silence between them. She had tried to warn him, and he had shut her out. He was building walls of his own, thick and high, but she could feel the cracks in them. The rest of the day passed in uneasy quiet. When evening came, the servants arrived with supper, a silver tray laden with roasted meat, dark bread, and wine. But they were not alone. A woman followed them into the room, tall and graceful, with hair the color of snow and eyes like chips of blue ice. She was beautiful in the way a blade is beautiful, sharp, perfect, and cold. The servants bowed and withdrew, leaving her standing there. "Who are you?" Ava asked, rising from her chair. The woman smiled. "Lady Seraphina," she said, "an old friend of His Majesty." Ava's stomach nodded. "You came here for him." "Of course, the king and I have history." Her gaze flicked over Ava's simple gown, her unadorned hair. "You must be the little Omega everyone whispers about." Ava said nothing. Seraphina's smile widened. "Do not look so frightened. The Alpha King tires quickly of his amusements. When he does, you will find yourself forgotten, as all the others have been." She turned, gliding toward the door. "Enjoy your meal." When she was gone, the room seemed smaller. The food sat untouched. Ava went to the window, watching as the last of the daylight slipped behind the peaks. The courtyard below was filled with movement guards, changing posts, servants carrying torches, and among them she saw Lucian. He was not alone. Lady Seraphina walked beside him, her pale hair gleaming in the torchlight. She laughed at something he said, resting her hand lightly on his arm. Lucian did not push her away. Ava's breath caught. For a moment she told herself it meant nothing, that this was politics, performance, some part of the intricate game of power. But when she saw the tightness in his jaw, the way his shoulders stiffened under Seraphina's touch, she knew. He was lying. Not to her enemies, but to her. The realization burned hotter than jealousy, hotter than fear. She pressed her hand to the glass, watching as they disappeared beneath the archway that led to the garden. Lucian had dismissed her warning, had pushed her away, but his mask had cracked when she spoke of the whispers, when she said she saw pain in him. He was hiding something, and whatever it was, it tied her fate to his more tightly than any prison ever could. The moon rose, pale and vast above the mountains. Ava turned from the window, the echo of her heartbeat loud in the empty room. She would not be a pawn, not for Marcus, not for the court, and not for the Alpha King. If Lucian would not tell her the truth, she would find it herself. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the scent of pine and storm through the cracks in the window. The scent was his wild and clean, threaded with danger. She closed her eyes and breathed it in, letting it burn through her anger until only resolve remained. Tomorrow, she would begin her search. The whispers had led her once before. Perhaps they would again. Night draped itself across the mountain like a cloak of iron and frost. The fortress of the Alpha King slept, or pretended to. Fires guttered in their grates, the echo of boots faded from the corridors, and the endless murmur of wolves below the walls dulled to a low, restless hum. Ava Thorne waited until she was certain no sound remained but the crackle of the dying hearth. She dressed in silence, pulling on a plain cloak and boots, her hands shaking not from cold but from the weight of what she was about to do. Every instinct screamed that she was being reckless, but recklessness was the only thing that made her feel alive. The door opened without a whisper. The guards Lucian had posted were gone again, dismissed or bribed, she didn't know. The hall beyond yawned dark and empty. Shadows crawled over the walls in uneven pulses as the torches guttered. She followed them like a thief chasing ghosts. The whispers began as soon as she reached the stairwell. This way. The sound brushed her ear like a lover's breath, soft and cold. Ava didn't question where it came from. She had stopped doubting the impossible. The whispers had led her to truth before. They would again. Down and down she went, deeper into the belly of the mountain. The air changed warmer first, then damp. The scent of parchment and dust grew stronger. When she pushed open the final door, the breath caught in her throat. The library stretched before her like a world turned inside out. It was not the small room she had seen before when Lucian's beast had nearly killed Connor Blake. This was something older, greater, a cathedral of knowledge. Stone arches soared overhead, carved into ribs that vanished into darkness. Shelves upon shelves of books rose higher than ladders could reach, their spines cracked, their titles etched in languages she didn't recognize. Ava stepped inside. Her footsteps stirred a fine film of dust, and it drifted upward like smoke. The silence here was so complete that she could hear the flutter of her heartbeat. The whispers returned, a faint susurration weaving between the stacks. The truth sleeps in ink and ash. She followed them. Her fingers traced the spines as she walked, leaving clean streaks in the dust. The air smelled of ink and old leather and something faintly metallic, like blood long dried. She found the section devoted to pack history tomes bound in wolfskin and sealed with wax. She pulled one at random. The parchment inside crackled as she turned the pages. Names, dates, bloodlines. The record of 1,000 years of dominance and death. She searched for her family's name. When she found it, her pulse stuttered. The book was old, the script tight and elegant, Housevale, descendants of the second bloodline. Her father's name appeared near the bottom of the page, written with careful precision. Beside it was her mother's, Alara Vale, née Thorn. Beneath her name, someone had drawn a small symbol, a crescent moon entwined with a thorned vine. The ink had faded almost to nothing. Ava frowned. The mark was familiar. She had seen it once before, carved into the clasp of her mother's pendant before Marcus had taken it from her. But below the symbol was something worse, a line of text written in a different hand, newer, heavier. Someone had tried to scratch it out, but she could still make out a single word beneath the smear of black ink. Lichen. The word slammed through her like a blow. Her breath hitched, and for a moment the room seemed to tilt. Lichen the first wolves. The mythical children of the moon goddess. Every child in the kingdom had heard stories of them, creatures of immense power, neither beast nor human, able to command nature itself. But they were stories, legends. No one was supposed to have lichen blood. Ava traced the word again, her fingers trembling. The ink had been burned into the parchment, as though someone had tried to destroy it with fire. She turned the page. Whole sections were torn out, leaving jagged scars where words should have been. The whisper in her ear grew louder. Blood remembers. She looked up sharply, scanning the shadows between the shelves. The air shimmered faintly, as if heat rippled through it. A shape, no. The outline of one moved at the far end of the aisle. A woman's form, luminous and fading, her face indistinct. Ava's voice was a whisper of its own. Mother? The figure tilted its head. Find the truth before the beast is lost. It breathed, and the sound made the candles tremble in their sconces. Ava took a step forward, but a sudden crash stopped her. The door to the library slammed open. Lucian stood framed in the threshold, the fire from the torches painting his face in violent light. His expression was a thunderhead, his golden eyes burning with a fury she had only seen once before. What are you doing here? His voice reverberated through the vast chamber, turning the silence to shrapnel. Ava froze, the book still open in her hands. I needed answers. He crossed the distance between them in heartbeats, the air bent around him, charged and electric. When he reached her, he snatched the book from her grip and slammed it shut. Dust exploded into the air like a cloud of ash. Do you have any idea what you've done? He hissed. You're hiding something from me, she said, forcing the words past the terror, clawing at her throat. This mark, this word, what does it mean? What is lichen? Lucian's face went pale, the anger twisting into something raw fear. For the first time she saw it, the crack in the armor, the man beneath the beast. Who told you that name? No one. It was written here. You knew, didn't you? You knew all along what I am. He seized her by the shoulders, his grip firm but not cruel. You are playing with fire you cannot control, he said, his voice low, trembling with the effort to stay calm. There are reasons truths are buried. They were meant to die with your parents. My parents died for this, she said, wrenching free. You owe me the truth. Lucian's jaw clenched. I owe you nothing. The words were a whip, but the anguish behind them was unmistakable. He braced his hands against the shelf behind her, caging her between his arms. The scent of him filled the space wild and dangerous, the air thick with dominance and desperation. Some secrets, he said, destroy anyone who hears them. Ava met his gaze without flinching. Then, destroy me. Something flickered in his eyes, pain, desire, something too fierce to name. His face was inches from hers, his breath hot against her skin. The silence between them stretched, taut and trembling. For a heartbeat, she thought he would kiss her. Instead, he recoiled as if burned. He stepped back, running a hand through his hair. "Get out," he said hoarsely. "Get out, and do not return here." She hesitated. "Lucian, now." The word carried the full weight of the Alpha King's command, and it struck her like a physical blow. Ava gathered the cloak around her and fled, the door slamming shut behind her. The echo of it chased her up the stairwell, through the dark corridors, all the way back to her chamber. When she reached it, she collapsed against the door, breath ragged. The book's image still burned in her mind, the mark, the name, the torn pages. Lichen. The word pulsed through her veins like another heartbeat. Outside, the wind howled, carrying the distant cry of wolves. Ava pressed her palm to her chest and whispered into the darkness, as if the shadows could hear her. "If my blood is cursed," she said, "then so is his." The fire in her chamber flared suddenly, as though in answer. For a moment, the flames took the shape of a wolf, howling at the moon before collapsing into sparks. The whispers returned, soft and mournful. "The truth burns. The truth frees." Ava stared into the fire until dawn broke, her eyes unblinking. She knew then that whatever bound her to the Alpha King was deeper than duty or desire. It was blood, and it was destiny, and it was only beginning to wake. The uneasy truce that had settled between Ava Thorne and the Alpha King shattered with the morning light. The library door had closed behind her, but the echoes of Lucian's fury followed her like a curse. For 2 days, he did not come. The fortress moved around her as if nothing had happened. Servants came and went. Guards changed their posts. Yet, beneath the rhythm of daily ritual, Ava sensed something brewing, a tension that crackled in the air, like the pressure before a storm. When the summons came on the 3rd evening, she was not surprised. "The king requests your presence," said the guard, his eyes fixed on some invisible point above her shoulder. Requests. The word was a lie. There were no requests in the Palace of Wolves, only commands draped in velvet. Ava followed him through winding corridors lit by the glow of torches. The scent of pine and smoke was stronger tonight, threaded with the metallic tang of anticipation. When they reached the grand dining hall, the heavy doors swung open to reveal a scene that glittered like a blade. The room had been transformed. The great table stretched the length of the hall, draped in black and gold cloth, set with silver plates and goblets that caught the firelight like captured stars. Dozens of alphas and nobles filled the space, their laughter sharp as broken glass. Music drifted from a corner soft, haunting, played by a quartet that looked too afraid to meet anyone's eyes. At the head of the table sat the Alpha King. Lucian was dressed not in the dark leathers she had come to associate with him, but in a formal coat of deep crimson, the color of spilled wine and blood. The firelight turned the gold embroidery at his cuffs into flame. When his gaze found hers across the room, the noise of the hall seemed to fade. For an instant, she could not breathe. "Lady Thorne," he said, his voice smooth, impersonal, "join us." A servant pulled out a chair for her, 2 seats down from his right. Ava sat, feeling the weight of every stare in the room press down on her. The whispers began at once. The Omega, the king's pet, the witch's daughter. She kept her head high, her hands folded in her lap, and stared at the silver goblet before her until her reflection blurred into the wine within. The dinner unfolded like a ritual. Toasts were raised, laughter spilled, alliances danced unseen in the spaces between words. Ava ate little, the food tasted of ash. She felt Lucian's presence at the head of the table, vast and unyielding, yet he did not look at her again. Then, as the last course was cleared, a chair scraped across the floor. "Your Majesty," said a voice from further down the table. Smooth, confident, familiar. Ava's blood turned cold. Lord Connor Blake rose to his feet. The bruises that had once marred his face were gone, replaced by a smile that did not reach his eyes. He lifted his goblet. "My lords, ladies," he said, his tone honeyed, "before this night ends, I have an announcement to make." Lucian's golden gaze turned on him like the sun turning on a moth. "An announcement?" Connor inclined his head, pretending respect. "Indeed, your Majesty, I would not speak without cause." The hall stilled. Even the music faltered. Connor's smile widened. After much consideration, he said, and with the generous blessing of her guardian, Lord Marcus Vale. Ava's head snapped up. Her uncle's name struck her like a physical blow. "I am honored to announce my intention to claim the Omega Ava Thorn as my chosen mate." The words hung in the air like the moment before lightning. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the hall erupted. Voices collided, gasps and murmurs and laughter bleeding together into chaos. Ava sat frozen, her fingers digging into the wood of her chair. The blood drained from her face. Lucian did not rise immediately. He sat utterly still, his expression unreadable, but the light around him seemed to change. The fire dimmed, the air grew heavy. Connor mistook the silence for opportunity. "It is only proper," he said, raising his voice to carry over the din. "She is of noble blood, after all, an Omega of rare grace. I would see her restored to honor. Surely the king must see the wisdom in that." The king moved. He didn't stand so much as erupt from his chair, the motion fluid, violent. The sound of the goblet in his hand shattering against the floor rang through the hall like the crack of a whip. The laughter died at once. Before anyone could draw breath, Lucian vaulted over the table. Plates and candles scattered in his wake, wine splashing across the marble like blood. In the next instant, he was upon Connor Blake. The impact of their collision sent the smaller man sprawling across the floor. Lucian's fist connected with his jaw once, twice, a blur of red and gold and fury. The sound was sickening. The Alpha King's eyes blazed with an unholy light, his teeth bared in a snarl that was not human. "Lucian!" Ava's voice cut through the air, but he didn't hear her. Connor choked out a laugh, blood spilling down his chin. "You see?" he gasped. "The beast cannot be tamed." "And so?" Lucian's hand closed around his throat. The hall descended into chaos. Chairs toppled, servants fled. The councilmen shouted, their words lost in the rising roar. Lucian squeezed, the tendons in his forearms straining. Ava was on her feet before she realized she'd moved. She ran to him, the hem of her gown catching underfoot, her voice rising above the noise. "Stop!" The command tore from her throat with such force that for a moment everything froze. Lucian's body went rigid. His hand loosened. Connor collapsed, coughing violently, blood spattering the floor. The king rose, chest heaving, his eyes flickering between gold and black. For a heartbeat, he looked lost. Then his gaze found Ava. The fury drained from his face, replaced by something worse, something raw, unguarded. "Take him out," he said hoarsely. The guards rushed forward, hauling Connor to his feet. Lucian turned to the court, his voice breaking through the stunned silence. "Let every wolf here bear witness," he said, "by the laws of our kind and by my right as Alpha King." He stopped, his gaze finding Ava again. The words that followed were both a promise and a sentence. "She is mine." A collective gasp shivered through the hall. The air trembled with the weight of it. The declaration was sacred, irreversible. The bond he had spoken of before instinctive, invisible, was now made law. Ava stared at him, her heart hammering. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Lucian's voice deepened, steady and final. "Ava Thorn is under my protection, my mark, my claim. Any who defy this will answer with their blood." The court erupted again, this time with shouts of disbelief and fury. No Alpha King had ever claimed an Omega not in living memory. It was a violation of every tradition, every law that had held the packs together for centuries. But Lucian did not flinch. His gaze remained locked on her, fierce and unwavering, as if daring anyone to challenge what had just been spoken. When the uproar reached its peak, he turned and strode from the hall, his cloak swirling behind him like the shadow of a storm. Ava followed, unable to stop herself. Outside, in the cold corridor, the noise from the hall faded to a dull roar. Lucian stood with his back to her, one hand pressed against the stone wall as if to steady himself. His shoulders trembled once, and then he spoke. "I warned them," he said softly. "I warned them all." Ava approached slowly. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." He turned to her, and his eyes burned brighter than the torches lining the walls. "Do you think they would have left you in peace? Your uncle would have sold you to the highest bidder. Connor would have used you to undermine my throne. I did what I had to do. You claimed me," she whispered. "Before the court, before the world. I saved you," he corrected. "By taking away my choice, I coming what ought." Lucian's jaw tightened. "Choice is a luxury for those not hunted." Ava shook her head. "You've made me something I never asked to be." His gaze softened, but only for a moment. "And yet," he said quietly, "you are the only thing in this cursed world that feels real." The words should have frightened her. Instead, they left her breathless. Lucian stepped closer, his voice a whisper that barely reached her ears. "Whatever else they call me, monster, beast, king, I will never let them take you." Then he turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the corridor, the echo of his footsteps fading into the dark. Ava pressed a hand to her chest. Her pulse raced beneath her fingers, wild and uncertain. She was no longer the girl who had been dragged into the court to face humiliation. She was the Alpha King's claimed mate, his shield, his weakness, his tether. And though she did not yet know it, the first blow in the coming war had just been struck. The fortress had not known peace for years, but the night after the Alpha King's public claim of Ava Thorne was something different altogether. The walls themselves seemed to hum with unease, every torch whispering, every draft carrying rumors. The servants moved like ghosts, the soldiers avoided one another's eyes, and in the council chambers the whispers of rebellion burned hotter than the hearth. Ava did not sleep. She sat by the fire in her chambers, staring at her reflection in the window, the girl who had been humiliated, the woman who had been claimed. Beyond the glass, the mountains crouched under the weight of a bruised sky. Snow fell without sound. Somewhere in that silence, she thought she could hear the faint echo of wolves howling from the lower forests. The door creaked open. She turned sharply, expecting Lucian, but the figure that entered was small and stooped with age. A woman draped in dark robes, her silver hair braided and coiled like a crown. "You should not be here," Ava said. "The guards—" "Will not stop me," the woman interrupted. Her voice was soft, but there was steel beneath it. "I am Eleanor Wren, elder of the High Council. I was not invited to your claiming, but I have lived long enough to know what it means." Ava rose slowly. "Then you know I didn't ask for it." Eleanor studied her for a long moment, her gray eyes sharp as flint. "No one asks for prophecy," she said. "It asks for us." The words sent a chill through Ava. "Prophecy?" Eleanor moved closer, the hem of her robe whispering across the floor. "You have noticed it, haven't you? The whispers in the walls, the way the air bends around him when he is angry, the pull you feel between you that frightens and comforts all at once." Ava's breath caught. "You know about that." "I know what it means." Eleanor stopped beside the fire. Its glow caught in the lines of her face, tracing a map of sorrow and age. "Our king carries the blood of the first Alpha, the line that bargained with darkness for strength enough to conquer this realm. Each generation has paid for that bargain in madness and rage. The curse has grown stronger, wilder, until it no longer whispers, it screams. And Lucian," she sighed, "Lucian stands on the edge of that scream." Ava felt the truth of it settle heavy in her chest. "I've seen it," she whispered. The night he fought Connor Blake. The beast inside him, it nearly tore through. Eleanor nodded. And yet, he stopped. Because of you. Me? There is an old prophecy, child. The elder's voice softened. A king of savage blood will rise, his reign a storm of fire and might. His soul will be claimed by a daughter of the moon, who will either tame his beast and bring the dawn, or shatter his soul and bring the endless night. The fire cracked, scattering embers like stars. Ava stared at them, her thoughts spinning. A daughter of the moon, she repeated. Eleanor turned to her fully. You carry the mark of lichen. I can see it in your eyes, in the way the shadows cling to you, yet never consume you. Your mother's line was blessed by the moon goddess herself, before the curse ever touched the first alpha. That blessing has slept for generations, waiting. It woke the moment you looked into the Alpha King's eyes. Ava's throat tightened. The mark in the old book, the crescent moon and thorned vine, flashed in her mind. My blood. Your blood is the key, Eleanor said. And his salvation, or his destruction. Before Ava could speak, a distant roar shook the room. The fire flared high, its light bleaching the stone walls white. Eleanor's eyes went wide. He feels it, she whispered. The curse is stirring. Ava bolted for the door. The guards outside were already shouting, their torches bobbing as they ran toward the northern wing. She followed, her bare feet slapping against the cold stone. The sound of her name echoed down the corridors. When she burst into the hall outside Lucian's chambers, the air was thick with the scent of smoke and blood. The guards stood uncertain, their faces pale. The heavy doors of the king's room shook under the weight of something slamming from within. Open it, Ava cried. My lady, it is not safe. Open it, she commanded again, her voice laced with a power she didn't recognize. The guards obeyed. The door flew inward. Lucian stood in the center of the room, his hands braced on the edge of the great table where maps and scrolls lay scattered. His eyes blazed gold, too bright, too wild. The veins at his temples stood out, his breathing ragged. Every muscle in his body trembled with the effort of restraint. Lucian, she whispered. He turned toward her, and for a heartbeat she saw the beast. His pupils were thin slits, his teeth too sharp, his skin glistening with sweat. When he spoke, his voice was layered two tones, one human, one something else. Get out. Ava took a step closer. You're hurting. Now. The snarl that ripped from his throat was not a man's. The guards flinched. But Ava did not move. She crossed the room slowly, every step deliberate. The closer she came, the more she could feel the storm in him, rage, sorrow, guilt, all tangled together into something feral. Do you know what I see when I close my eyes? He said, his voice breaking. I see the night of the massacre. I see fire and blood and the faces of the people I failed to save. He gripped the edge of the table until the wood splintered under his hands. They call me the Savage King because I tore my enemies apart with my bare hands. They don't know that one of those enemies was my own father. Ava froze. Your father? Lucian's eyes flicked toward her, wild and gleaming. He was the one who began it. The night the rogues came, he ordered me to protect the throne. When I returned, the palace was burning. My father stood over the bodies of your parents, Ava. The blade in his hand was silver. Her knees weakened. My parents, I believed they were killed by rogues, he said. I believed it for years, but I remember now. I saw his eyes. I did nothing. His voice dropped to a whisper. I let him live. And when I ascended, I swore I would never become him. But the curse doesn't care about oaths. It's in my blood. He staggered forward, the beast beneath his skin clawing to break free. His nails lengthened, his breath came in growls. It's taking me, Ava. No, she said, stepping closer until she was within reach. You're stronger than it. You don't understand. I do. She reached out and touched his face. His skin burned under her palm. You told me I was under your protection. Let me return it. The beast roared inside him. He dropped to his knees, clutching his head. The sound he made was inhuman, a cry torn from the soul. Ava sank down beside him, her hand still on his cheek. The warmth that spread from her skin into his was different from the fever of rage. It was cool, steady, silver. Lucian's breathing slowed. The gold in his eyes dimmed to amber, then to the dark brown she remembered from the night she first saw him. His body went still. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The storm had passed. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw. "What did you do?" "I don't know," she said, "but I think the whispers were right. The curse isn't just yours anymore." Outside, thunder rolled across the mountains, though the sky was clear. The air tasted of metal and rain. Lucian looked at her hand, where it still touched his face, and then at her eyes. For a heartbeat, he looked afraid not of the beast, but of her. Eleanor Wren's words echoed in Ava's mind. She will either tame his beast and bring the dawn, or shatter his soul and bring the endless night. Ava lowered her hand. "The council won't stop," she said quietly. "They'll use this against you." Lucian stood, steady now, though pale. "Let them come. I've given them something to fear again." He turned toward the window, his silhouette framed by the moonlight. "You should rest. Tomorrow the council will move, and when they do, I will be ready." Ava looked at him, this man who was both king and monster, and felt something inside her shift. Whatever she was becoming, it was tied to him now, bound by blood, prophecy, and choice. As she left the chamber, the whispers returned, curling through her thoughts like smoke. The moon rises, the beast bows, the dawn will cost blood. And Ava knew they were right. The taming had begun, but the curse had only just awakened. Dawn broke like the shattering of glass, cold, sharp, merciless. The fortress awoke not to light, but to preparation. The High Council had spoken in the night, their decree carried on parchment, sealed with wax, so black it seemed to drink the color from the world. The message was simple and cruel. Ava Thorne was to be bound to Lord Connor Blake by the ancient rites of union. The ceremony would take place before sunset, in the Great Hall, under the blessing of the moon. Ava learned of it when the guards came to her chamber. They did not meet her eyes. "The council summons you," one said, his voice tight, with something between pity and fear. "What is this?" she demanded. "What right do they have?" "The right of law," the man answered. "A royal decree signed by the council's hand." Ava's blood ran cold. "Not by the king's?" Silence. The guards waited as she dressed. Her hands shook as she fastened the plain white gown laid out for her the color of innocence, of surrender. It felt wrong against her skin, heavy as mourning cloth. When she was ready, they led her through the corridors she had come to know too well. The walls seemed closer now, the air thick with dread. The great hall had been transformed. Where once banners of crimson and black had hung to honor the Alpha King, now there were silken drapes of pale silver, the ceremonial color of union. Flowers, white lilies, and wolfsbane spilled from every corner, their scent sweet and poisonous. A long carpet stretched from the doors to the dais, and at its end stood the altar of stone used for all pack rituals. Connor waited there, dressed in finery that glimmered under torchlight. His smile was polished, his bruises long faded, but his eyes still gleamed with cruelty. At his side stood Lord Marcus Vale, her uncle, his expression triumphant. Together they looked like twin blades, one sharp with malice, the other with pride. Ava's stomach turned. She searched the crowd, desperate for a glimpse of Lucian, but the throne at the head of the hall was empty. A chill crawled down her spine. "He's not coming," Marcus murmured as she passed him, his voice low enough for only her to hear. "The council has seen to that. A king's word is law only while the council allows it to be spoken." "You think he'll let this happen?" Ava whispered. Marcus smiled without warmth. "He has no choice. The court must be shown that the Alpha King's indulgences have limits. A crown cannot be ruled by lust." The words made her skin crawl. The ceremony began. The High Elder's voice droned through the hall, reciting the vows that would bind her life to Connor's. The crowd murmured in approval, the scent of their anticipation thick in the air. Ava stood motionless, her heart pounding in her chest like a trapped bird. The elder turned toward her. Do you, Ava Thorne, pledge your body and your blood to the union before you? Her lips parted, but no sound came. Her throat refused the words. Connor reached for her hand, his grip bruising. Answer, he hissed, or I'll drag the words from you. She wrenched her hand away. No. The hall gasped. The elder froze. Marcus stepped forward, his voice a whip. You will obey, girl. I will not, Ava said, louder now. I do not consent. Her defiance hung in the air like a spark over dry tinder. Then came a sound that tore through the hall, the deep, thunderous boom of the doors slamming open. Every head turned. The doors had been blasted from their hinges, shards of wood and iron flying like shrapnel. Smoke and snow billowed into the hall, and through it stepped a figure dressed in black armor that gleamed like obsidian. His eyes burned like molten gold, and his face was carved in fury. Lucian, the Alpha King. The crowd recoiled as he advanced, each step a promise of ruin. The wind howled behind him, carrying the scent of storm and blood. Guards rushed forward but stopped when he growled a sound so low and primal that it rattled the very stones beneath their feet. He stopped at the base of the dais. This farce ends now, he said. Marcus's face drained of color. You have no authority here. The council, Lucian interrupted, exists because I permit it. He lifted his hand and a single flicker of power rippled through the air. The torches lining the walls flared, their flames turning white. You dare to invoke the rights of union without my consent? You would bind my mate to another? Ava's breath caught. Around them, the murmurs began to rise again, the word mate spreading through the hall like wildfire. Connor sneered. You've lost control of yourself, Lucian. You claim an Omega as your equal and expect the realm to accept it? This is madness. Lucian moved faster than sight. One moment he was at the foot of the dais, the next his hand was around Connor's throat, lifting him off his feet. You presume to lecture me about control? Lucian, stop, Ava said softly. His head turned toward her, his eyes burning. You think I'll let them take you from me? The hall had gone utterly still. The only sound was Connor's strangled breathing. Lucian's fingers tightened. Lucian, Ava said again, her voice steady this time. Let him go. So, I think, for a moment, the beast in him hesitated, trapped between rage and the sound of her voice. Then, slowly, he released his grip. Connor collapsed to the ground, coughing, the imprint of Lucian's hand red on his neck. The king turned to face the assembled council. His voice rolled through the hall like thunder. Hear me, all of you. By my blood, by the law of the Pax, by the ancient right of the Alpha King, I claim her. The air itself seemed to shudder. Power radiated from him, visible in the shimmer of light that spread across the floor. The mark of the king, the unseen bond between alpha and mate, flared to life. A faint silver glow enveloped Ava, wrapping around her like moonlight made flesh. She is mine, Lucian said, his voice breaking with raw power. Mine then, now, and for all time. The words struck through Ava's chest like an arrow. She could feel the bond forming, a thread of heat that pulled from her heart to his, unbreakable. It was more than magic. It was destiny. The hall erupted into pandemonium. Some shouted in protest, others in awe. The council members stood frozen, unable to comprehend what they had just witnessed. Lucian turned to Marcus. You would have sold her to a traitor, he said. You would have defied your king. For that, you forfeit your title and your land. You are exiled. Marcus stumbled back, pale with fury. You'll regret this, he hissed. She will destroy you. Now, Lucian's reply was quiet but lethal. Then she will do what no man ever could. He turned to Ava, extending his hand. Come. Her legs felt weak, but she moved toward him, drawn by the invisible force between them. When her fingers touched his, the bond flared again, a surge of heat that stole her breath. Together they faced the crowd, their joined hands a living symbol of rebellion and fate. Lucian lifted his chin. "The ceremony is over," he said. "You have your queen, Eve Ardes." The hall fell silent. Even the torches seemed to bow. And as Lucian led her from the wreckage of the altar, Ava realized that her life had been rewritten in a single heartbeat. She was no longer a prisoner nor a pawn. She was the mate of the savage king, bound to him by blood, by power, by a love that could either save or destroy them both. The prophecy whispered in her mind as the doors closed behind them, "The daughter of the moon will tame the beast or end the world." Ava tightened her grip on Lucian's hand, her heart steady against the roar of the storm. Whatever came next, she would not run from it. The echoes of the great hall still followed them as Lucian led Ava through the palace. The clamor of the council's outrage was a storm that could not reach them here, muffled by walls older than memory. The corridors twisted downward into the heart of the fortress, where torchlight dimmed and shadows thickened into secrecy. Ava's fingers were still locked in her pulse thrumming in time with his own. They did not speak. There was nothing left to say. Every step carried the weight of a kingdom defied. When at last Lucian stopped before a massive set of iron-banded doors, the guards on either side bowed low and withdrew. He pushed the doors open, and the world changed. The king's private chambers were unlike anything she had seen before. Power lived here, raw and unmasked. The space was vast, carved from dark stone that drank the firelight. Furs of wolf, bear, and creatures she could not name covered the floor, softening the cold. A fire blazed in a hearth large enough to swallow a man whole, the flames reflecting off armor and weapons mounted along the walls. A long table, strewn with maps and scrolls, sat beneath the light of a single chandelier wrought from black iron and silver. Beyond it loomed a bed built for a god, draped in furs and shadows. Lucian closed the doors behind them. The heavy thud of the lock falling into place reverberated through Ava's bones. He turned toward her, his face unreadable in the flickering light. "Why did you do it?" she asked quietly. "In front of them all?" "Because they left me no choice," he said. "Because they would have taken you." "They already think you're mad," she said. "Now they'll think you've lost everything, reason, restraint, even fear." Lucian's mouth curved into something that might have been a smile, but there was no humor in it. "Let them. Fear has kept my throne intact for years. It will keep it intact a little longer." He walked past her to the hearth, staring into the flames. The light cast his face into harsh relief, revealing the exhaustion beneath the fury. Ava watched him, the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands flexed at his sides. For the first time since she had met him, he looked mortal. "You don't regret it?" she asked. He turned, the fire reflected in his eyes. "Do you?" The question stole her breath. "You've bound me to you," she said. "You've made me your equal before the court. I can't even begin to understand what that means." "It means you're alive," he said. "It means no one will ever touch you again without my consent." She flinched. "That's not freedom." "No," he agreed softly. "It's survival." Asmus all. They stood in silence, the fire's crackle filling the space between them. The bond that had flared in the great hall still pulsed faintly in her chest, a thread of heat connecting her to him. She could feel the weight of his heartbeat through it, steady, powerful, inescapable. "Come here," Lucian said. It wasn't a command, not this time. The words were quieter, heavier. Ava hesitated, then stepped forward until she stood before him. He lifted his hand, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. His touch was warm, gentle, in a way that made her tremble. "I have fought this bond since the moment I saw you," he said. "I told myself it was weakness, a distraction. I was wrong. It's the only thing in this cursed kingdom that feels real." Ava's heart hammered. "You don't even know what I am," she whispered. "You don't know what my blood means." "I know enough," he said. His fingers trailed down to her jaw, tilting her face toward his. I know that when you walked into that hall, every instinct in me recognized you. My wolf knew before I did. Her breath hitched. Lucian. He silenced her with a look. You've seen the beast. You know what lives under my skin. If I lose control again, you won't, she said. You don't know that. I know you stopped when I asked you to, she replied. You always stop. Is this so, friend Steck? Something flickered in his eyes, something fragile and almost human. He exhaled slowly, as though releasing a weight he had carried for years. Then he took another step closer. The distance between them vanished. The heat from the fire mingled with the warmth of his breath. Ava felt the pulse of the bond flare between them, a steady drumbeat that matched the rhythm of her own heart. This isn't politics, Lucian said. This isn't strategy. This is something older than either of us. You're mine, Ava Thorne, not because I claimed you, but because the gods decided it long before we were born. Her voice was a whisper. And if I don't want to belong to anyone? Lucian's lips curved faintly, sorrow shadowing the gesture. Then I'll spend the rest of my life trying to convince you that belonging to me doesn't mean losing yourself. He leaned in. The moment stretched, fragile and infinite, until his mouth found hers. The kiss was not gentle. It was a clash of fire and fear and everything neither of them dared say aloud. The bond roared to life, burning through her veins. She felt his power, ancient and wild, pouring into her not to consume, but to meet her own. She answered it, her fingers tangling in his hair, the world collapsing to the sound of their shared breath. When they finally broke apart, the room was changed. The torches burned brighter, the air thick with the scent of pine and smoke. Lucian rested his forehead against hers, his breath ragged. If I lose myself, he whispered, don't run. Ava looked up at him, her pulse steadying. Then we'll both be lost. He closed his eyes, a shiver running through him. You don't understand what you're promising. Then teach me. The words hung between them like a vow. For the first time, the king of wolves, feared by all, looked uncertain. But beneath that uncertainty was something deeper, a kind of wonder. He brushed his thumb along her jaw. You should rest. Tomorrow will bring blood. I don't want to rest, she said. He smiled faintly. Then stay. The night passed in silence and firelight. No words were spoken, but none were needed. When Ava finally slept, her head resting against his chest, she dreamed not of cages or chains, but of running through forests silvered by moonlight, a shadow beside her that moved with her heartbeat. Outside, the mountain winds howled, carrying with them the first scent of war. The claiming was complete, but peace, as always, would demand a price. For 3 days, a fragile peace hung over the Alpha King's fortress, as delicate and treacherous as a spider's web trembling in a draught. Ava Thorne remained in Lucian's private chambers, wrapped in an intimacy that felt both like sanctuary and captivity. They moved carefully around one another, as if the bond pulsing between them were a wild animal asleep on the floor that might wake at any moment. Lucian spoke more than he ever had, and for the first time his words were not commands but confessions. In the glow of the hearth he told her of the endless weight of the crown, of battles fought and brothers lost, of the first time he had felt the beast claw at his skin and known it was stronger than his will. In return, Ava spoke of her attic, of charcoal and paper, and a girl who had survived by drawing worlds she would never touch. They were 2 broken lives pressed together like halves of a torn map, searching for a place where the lines might meet. But beyond the door, the fortress was no longer still. The council had not forgiven the humiliation in the Great Hall, nor had Marcus Vale abandoned his hatred. They could not attack Lucian directly yet. Instead, they turned their knives toward the softest target. It began with whispers, servants murmuring of strange lights in Ava's room at night, of guttural words heard through the walls. A small, crudely sewn doll surfaced in a storage trunk, a puppet stuffed with herbs and wolf hair, its chest pierced by a silver needle. The council produced a frightened scullery girl who swore she had seen Ava kneeling before the fire, her lips moving in unknown incantations. Each piece was a lie, but together they built a story sharp enough to cut. The accusation spread like frost over glass. Witch, enchanter, the Omega who bewitched the king. In a court that had grown superstitious from fear of the curse, it was an easy poison to swallow. On the third evening, while Lucian sat in council with his generals arguing over troop movements and traitors' names, the trap was sprung. Ava sat by the fire, sketching the outline of a wolf beneath a crescent moon, when the door crashed open. She looked up to see Lord Grant Holloway step inside, flanked by a dozen armed guards. His face was a mask of solemnity, but his eyes glittered with triumph. "Ava Thorne of House Vale," he intoned. "By order of the High Council, you are under arrest for the crime of witchcraft and treason against the crown." Ava rose slowly, the charcoal slipping from her fingers. "What?" Holloway held up a scroll sealed with the council's sigil. "We have evidence. Dark magic, manipulation of the Alpha King's mind. You will stand trial." "I have done nothing," her voice cracked. Two guards seized her arms. Their grips were bruising. Ava twisted, but they held fast. "Lucian will stop you," she said. "He won't allow this." "Not even the king can interfere with the old laws," Holloway said smoothly. "An accusation of witchcraft supported by evidence must be met with an immediate trial. The law protects even us from the beast." A guard stepped forward, carrying something on a velvet cushion, the crude doll they had planted. Its stitched mouth grinned up at her, grotesque and false. Ava shook her head. "That's not mine. I've never seen it before." Holloway's smile was thin. "Tell it to the elders." "Is." She opened her mouth to scream, but a roar ripped through the corridor outside, shaking the walls. The doors at the far end flew open, and Lucian stormed into the chamber like a thundercloud given flesh. "What is the meaning of this?" His voice cracked the air. His eyes were already burning. His shoulders squared to strike. "The law is clear, Your Majesty," Holloway said, though his tone trembled. "Even the king cannot deny a trial of witchcraft. This is mist of the bring loss." Lucian's gaze flicked to the doll, then to the guards holding Ava. For one fatal, heart-shattering moment, he hesitated. She saw it, just a flicker of doubt, of agonizing uncertainty in his eyes. Could it be true? The question was there before he could kill it. That flicker was all it took. Something inside Ava broke. She stopped struggling. The hope that had been blooming between them withered in an instant. She went still in the guard's hands, her face pale and unreadable. "Lucian," she whispered, "do you believe them?" He opened his mouth, but no words came. Her heart went cold. After everything, after the bond, the claiming, the confessions, he looked at her now and saw not his mate, but a potential curse. The guards began to drag her toward the door. Marcus stepped from the shadows where he had been waiting, his smile triumphant. He leaned close as she passed, his breath foul against her ear. "Your mother was a witch too," he hissed. "It runs in the blood. If you like..." From his sleeve he drew a small, ornate dagger. Its blade was black, coated in something dark and oily. He let her see it just long enough for horror to bloom in her eyes before slipping it back into hiding. She went limp in the guard's grasp. Lucian took a single step forward, his face twisting in rage. "Release her." "The trial will begin at dawn," Holloway said. "If she is innocent, the gods will spare her." The guards hauled Ava out. The heavy doors slammed shut, leaving Lucian alone with the echo of his own hesitation. He stared at the place where she had been, the crude doll still on its cushion like a mockery. His hands trembled, his chest rose and fell with ragged breaths. For the first time in years, the Alpha King felt fear not for himself, but for what he had just allowed to happen. Somewhere deep in the fortress, a wolf howled a long, mournful cry that shivered through the stones. The walls whispered back, though only Ava could have heard the words. "The beast cannot be caged forever." And in the darkness of her cell, Ava stared at the ceiling, Marcus's hiss still in her ear, and the memory of Lucian's doubt burning deeper than any wound. The prophecy no longer felt like a story. It felt like a blade being drawn. By dawn, the bond between them would be tested in blood. The cell was cut from the mountain's ribs, cold, narrow, and airless. The only light came from a slit in the wall where snowflakes drifted through, melting before they reached the stone floor. Ava Thorne sat with her back against the wall, her wrists raw from the iron shackles that bound her. Each breath left her lips as a ghost. Time moved strangely in the dark. She didn't know how long she'd been there, only that the chill had crept into her bones and the silence had begun to whisper. Not the voices of the stone this time, but her own thoughts, circling like caged birds. He hesitated. That single moment replayed over and over, Lucian's golden eyes widening, the flicker of doubt that had cut through her like a blade. It had been enough. They'd torn her away before he could decide whether to save her or to save his crown. When the footsteps came, she thought at first she had imagined them. But then a key scraped in the lock, and the heavy door groaned open. Marcus Vale entered, flanked by 2 guards. He held a lantern that painted the walls in trembling gold. "You look well, niece," he said, though his tone was dry as dust. "Prison becomes you." Ava forced herself to stand. "What do you want?" Marcus set the lantern down on a stone shelf. "To see you before dawn." Her pulse quickened. "The trial." He smiled, showing perfect predatory teeth. "If we're being honest, the outcome has already been decided. The council has gathered its evidence and the people are eager for a spectacle. By sunrise, the witch who ensnared the Alpha King will burn and the curse will die with her." "You think killing me will break his curse?" she said. "You think you understand what you've woken?" Marcus stepped closer, his shadow long against the wall. "I understand power. That's all that ever matters." "You'll never have it," she said, meeting his eyes. "Lucian may doubt me, but he'll never let you rule." Alfred. Lucian, Marcus sneered, is already halfway to becoming the monster he fears. When he gives in, the council will put him down like a rabid animal. The Pax will need a new leader, one untouched by the curse. I intend to be that man. He leaned closer, his breath warm against her cheek. "And you, dear Ava, will be my proof. Your death will cleanse the throne." Ava's stomach twisted, but she kept her voice steady. "You're afraid," she said. "Afraid of him. Afraid of me." Marcus laughed softly. "Perhaps. Fear and ambition are brothers." He turned toward the door. "At dawn, the pyre will be ready. Pray, if witches pray at all." When he was gone, the cell fell silent again. But Ava no longer felt alone. She could sense it, the faint pulse of the bond, buried beneath layers of stone and fear. It was weaker now, but alive. Lucian was still out there. She closed her eyes and reached for it, focusing on the memory of his heartbeat against hers, the warmth of his breath when he had promised not to let her go. She didn't know if he could hear her, but she whispered anyway. "Lucian, please, wake up." Far above the dungeons, in the war room, the Alpha King sat in darkness. The council had dispersed, their parting words echoes of judgment. A king who protects a witch cannot protect a kingdom. Lucian had not spoken since they dragged Ava away. His generals stood at a distance, watching their king unravel in silence. His hands rested on the table before him, fingers twitching against the map's edge. He stared at nothing. Eleanor Wren, the elder, stood near the hearth. "You know what they plan," she said. Lucian didn't answer. "They'll burn her at dawn. They've twisted the old laws. The council believes they act with divine sanction, but the gods do not guide men. They only watch them destroy." Lucian lifted his head. His eyes glowed faintly in the firelight. "I hesitated," he said. "I saw the doll, the blood, and for a moment I believed." "You believed what they wanted you to believe," Eleanor interrupted. "That the curse begins and ends with her. It doesn't. You've carried it since birth." He closed his eyes. "Then she dies because of me. Or she lives because of you," Eleanor said. "The prophecy can still be fulfilled." Lucian's jaw tightened. "You would have me trust in prophecy?" "I would have you trust in the bond," she said softly. "You felt it the moment you claimed her. You know it's more than desire. It's the only thing that's ever silenced the beast." Lucian stood suddenly, the chair toppling backward. The beast inside him stirred, drawn by rage and guilt. His claws itched beneath his skin. If I go to her now, I'll kill them all. Then kill them, Eleanor said. Better a tyrant than a coward. Set. The words hit him like a blow. He turned toward the window. Outside, the first light of false dawn touched the mountains, painting the snow in gray and gold. The wind carried the distant sound of drums. Lucian's lips parted, a low growl rising from his chest. Dawn, he said. Eleanor nodded. You have until the sun clears the peaks. He didn't wait another breath. The guards came for Ava just as the horizon began to pale. They bound her hands and led her through the tunnels toward the courtyard. The smell of smoke reached her before she saw the pyre. It stood in the center of the yard, a pillar of stacked wood glistening with oil. The council waited, draped in ceremonial robes, their faces carved from stone. Ava's feet dragged as they brought her forward. The crowd gathered beyond the gates. Soldiers, servants, nobles, all drawn to witness the cleansing of a witch. Lord Holloway raised his voice. Ava Thorne of Housevale, you stand accused of witchcraft, treason, and the corruption of our king. What say you? Ava lifted her chin. I say the real curse is not in my blood, but in yours. You've poisoned this kingdom with your greed. The crowd stirred, uneasy. Holloway's face darkened. Then let the fire speak for you. The guards tied her to the post. Oil soaked her gown, chilling her skin. She closed her eyes, feeling the rope bite into her wrists. Somewhere beneath the roar of the wind, she felt it, a heartbeat that wasn't hers. Lucian. The first torch was raised. A thunderclap split the sky. The gates exploded inward, iron flying like shrapnel. A storm of black wolves poured through, their eyes burning gold. At their center strode the Alpha King. He was not a man now. Not entirely. The beast had come halfway to the surface, his claws bared, his teeth glinting, his eyes molten. His armor was scorched, his cloak torn, and every step he took seemed to shake the ground. The crowd screamed. Release her, he roared, his voice layered with thunder. Holloway stammered, Your Majesty, this is the council's. Lucian's hand rose. The nearest torch went out as if crushed by invisible fingers. Release her, he said again, quieter now, more dangerous. No one moved. Then Marcus stepped forward, smiling. You come too late, nephew. The trial has already begun. Isn't it? Lucian's gaze locked on him. Then it ends with you. Marcus drew the black dagger. You were never meant to rule, Lucian. The curse ends tonight, one way or another. He lunged. Lucian met him halfway. The clash of steel and claw filled the air, sparks flying. The beast in the king surged forward, fueled by fury and fear. Marcus struck again and again, but Lucian's movements were faster, less human, each blow a blur of strength. Ava struggled against the ropes, the fire catching at the edges of the wood. The smoke stung her eyes. She shouted his name, her voice breaking. Lucian heard her. He turned just as Marcus slashed the dagger across his side. The blade bit deep, its poison searing through him. He snarled, caught Marcus by the throat, and with one brutal motion threw him into the pyre. The flames roared to life, consuming the man's scream. The fire spread, catching Ava's gown. Lucian staggered toward her, blood pouring from the wound. He tore through the ropes with his claws, lifting her into his arms. The fire curled around them, but it did not touch her. The bond pulsed between them, silver and gold, pushing the flames away like a living barrier. He looked down at her, his face pale beneath the soot. Ava, he whispered, I'm sorry. Her tears fell onto his cheek. You came for me. I always will. Then he fell. The courtyard erupted in chaos. Wolves howled, guards fled, the council scattered. The fire devoured the pyre, the smoke rising like a black banner into the dawn. Ava knelt beside him, her hands slick with his blood. The dagger's poison had turned the wound black. She pressed her palms to it, desperate. Don't, he murmured. It's too late. No, she said, her voice breaking. Not yet. The prophecy said I could tame the beast. Lucian's eyes, already dimming, met hers. Then tame it, little moon. The bond flared one last time. Light poured from her hands, silver and fierce. The mark on her wrist burned like fire. The poison hissed and vanished, the wound sealing beneath her touch. But the light did not stop. It spread through her, through him, into the stones themselves. The mountain groaned, the fire guttered out, the world went still. When the silence settled, Ava was on her knees, Lucian's head in her lap. He breathed barely. The mark of the bond glowed faintly between them. The dawn broke at last, pale and cold, touching the smoke that curled into the sky. In that fragile light, Ava realized what she had done. She had saved him. But in doing so, she had woken something far older than the curse. The dawn after the fire rose pale and cruel over the fortress. Smoke still clung to the air, mingling with the metallic scent of blood and the sharp tang of ash. The courtyard was a graveyard of embers. Charred wood lay where the pyre had stood. Blackened stone steamed where the snow had melted from the heat. And in the center of it all, on a bed of scorched earth, lay the Alpha King. Lucian's chest rose and fell, faint and uneven. The wound across his side had closed under Ava's touch, but the poison that had soaked Marcus's dagger had done its work. His skin was cold, his lips pale, and when she tried to wake him, his body convulsed as though something inside him fought to break free. "Lucian," she whispered, cradling his face. "Please, look at me." His eyelids fluttered but did not open. Beneath her hands, she felt the pulse of his heartbeat falter, then surge again, wild and irregular. Around them, the fortress stirred. Wolves and soldiers alike stood frozen at the edges of the courtyard, unsure whether to kneel or flee. Lord Holloway was dead, his throat torn open, and the remaining counselors had scattered into the mountains during the chaos. The kingdom that had once seemed carved in stone was now trembling on its foundations. Eleanor Wren pushed through the crowd, her robes streaked with soot. "Bring him inside," she ordered, her voice calm though her eyes were sharp with fear. "If the curse takes him now, it will not be the man who rises." Ava nodded numbly, her hands slick with Lucian's blood. Soldiers came forward to lift him, but she stopped them. "No one touches him," she said, her voice steady, though her throat burned. "I'll do it." They obeyed. She rose, summoning strength she did not know she had, and with Eleanor's help, half-carried, half-led Lucian through the smoldering gates back into the fortress. The corridors felt colder than ever, their shadows long and watchful. The whispers in the walls followed her every step. The beast wakes, the king fades. They laid him upon the bed in his chambers, the same bed where she had first dreamed of peace. His body trembled, his skin slick with sweat, his breathing shallow. The mark of their bond glowed faintly at his throat, pulsing in time with her own heartbeat. Eleanor examined the wound, her lips pressed in a thin line. "The poison was crafted to break an alpha's will," she said. "It drives the wolf forward until there is nothing human left to stop it. If it reaches his heart—" Ava caught her hand. "Then tell me how to stop it." Eleanor met her eyes. "You already know." The prophecy was never about destroying the beast. It was about choosing whether to cage it or to stand beside it. Ava turned back to Lucian. His eyes had opened gold, shot through with black, the beast's gaze staring through him. His breath came in low growls, his fingers clawing at the sheets. She leaned over him, pressing her hands against his chest. "Lucian, listen to me. You're stronger than this." His head turned sharply, his lips drawing back from his teeth. "Get out!" he rasped, his voice layered with the growl of the wolf beneath. "Before I hurt you." "You won't," she said. His hand shot up, closing around her wrist. His grip was like iron, but she did not flinch. "You don't understand," he gasped. "It's inside me! The poison, the curse, they're the same. If I let go, if I breathe wrong, you die with me. Then we'll breathe together," Ava said. He stared at her, torn between rage and despair. "You should hate me. You should have run. Is rehab—" "I tried," she said. "You found me anyway." A shudder tore through him, the beast rising in waves. The mark of the bond burned brighter, a thin ribbon of light that connected his chest to hers. Pain lanced through her body, but she did not move. She let it burn through her veins, let it join with her heartbeat, until she could feel him inside her, his fear, his fury, his shame. "You're killing yourself," Eleanor warned. "No," Ava whispered. "I'm sharing it." And the light deepened, shifting from silver to gold. Lucian's body arched, a strangled cry tearing from his throat. The veins of blackness that had crept along his skin began to fade, replaced by a faint shimmer of light. His claws retracted. His breathing steadied. When at last he went still, Ava sagged forward, her forehead resting against his chest. His heartbeat was strong again, the rhythm of it steady against her skin. Eleanor exhaled. "You've bound yourself to him completely now. Whatever happens to one will happen to the other." Ava nodded, too weak to lift her head. "Then neither of us will die alone." She felt Lucian's fingers twitch, then close gently around hers. His voice was hoarse when he spoke. "You shouldn't have done that!" "You'd have done the same," she murmured. He laughed, a low, broken sound that was more breath than mirth. "I would have tried." When she finally looked up, his eyes were clear again, no longer gold, but warm amber. The beast was still there, but tamed, watching her from behind the man's gaze. Outside, thunder rolled across the peaks, though no storm had come. Eleanor stepped to the window, her expression grim. "The council will call this blasphemy," she said. "They'll say you've merged souls. They'll hunt you both to the ends of the world." Lucian pushed himself upright with effort. "Then we'll give them a reason to be afraid." Ava touched his arm, feeling the strength return beneath her palm. "You can barely stand." He turned to her, his expression softening. "You gave me back more than my strength." His hand brushed the back of her neck, the mark of their bond glowing beneath his fingers. "Whatever happens now, you are my equal. Not my prisoner, not my salvation, my mirror." She smiled faintly, though exhaustion tugged at her. "That's a dangerous thing to tell me." "Good," he said, and for the first time in days, there was warmth in his voice. "Let the world see what danger looks like when it has something to protect." By nightfall, word of Marcus Vale's death had spread to every corner of the realm. Some said he had been burned for treason. Others whispered that the king himself had torn out his heart. Few spoke of the woman who had walked through fire and lived. In the great hall, Lucian's generals gathered. Plans were already forming, names of traitors, fortresses to reclaim, blood debts to pay. But Lucian listened only half to their words. His gaze strayed again and again toward the doorway, waiting for the soft sound of Ava's steps. She came at last, her gown pale against the dark stone. The room fell silent as she entered. The soldiers bowed. Lucian rose. "The king lives," she said softly. He inclined his head. "Because the queen defied death." The title hung in the air, unspoken but undeniable. Eleanor's voice broke the silence. "Be careful, my king. The gods are watching." "I'm Zeit." Lucian smiled without humor. "Then let them learn what it means to fear their own creation." That night, when Ava stood alone on the balcony, the mountains stretched endless before her, washed in moonlight. The whispers came again, but this time they were clear, almost kind. The beast kneels to the moon. The world bends to the bond. She turned toward the bed where Lucian slept, his chest rising steady and strong. The storm was far from over. The council would not rest. The curse still lived in their blood. But for the first time, Ava was not afraid. She traced the mark glowing faintly on her wrist and whispered to the night, "The king's blood runs through me now." And somewhere deep within the mountain, something ancient stirred neither curse nor blessing, but power newly born waiting for its time to rise. The morning after, the fire broke over the fortress in a silence so deep it hurt. The world outside lay blanketed in fresh snow, the mountains shrouded in fog as if the heavens themselves wished to hide what had been done. The pyre's ashes had been swept away, but the smell of smoke still lingered, faint and stubborn, clinging to stone and memory alike. Ava Thorne woke before dawn. For a moment, she did not remember where she was. The chamber was unfamiliar in the half-light, though the bed beneath her still held the warmth of Lucian's body. He had fallen into a restless sleep after the long night, his breathing rough, his brow damp. The wound on his side, healed but not whole, glimmered faintly in the moonlight, the mark of the poison's passage, a shadow beneath his skin. She watched him for a long time, her heart heavy with both gratitude and dread. He had survived Marcus's blade because she had given him part of herself to anchor him. Now their hearts beat as one. If he fell, she would follow. The whispers in the stone had been quiet since the fire, but that morning as the wind pressed against the windows, she heard them again, soft, urgent, familiar. The past is not buried. It waits for the living to kneel. A chill ran through her. She turned to the door just as a knock broke the silence. Eleanor Wren entered, her dark robe sweeping the floor. "You're awake," the elder said. "Good, there is something you must see." Ava rose quickly, glancing once at Lucian. He did not stir. "He's still weak," she said. "He will wake," Eleanor replied. "The poison in his blood is gone, but the memories it carries will return. That is why we must move before he does." Ava frowned. "What do you mean?" The old woman's eyes were grave. "Your uncle's death was only the beginning. Marcus was not the one who forged the blade that nearly killed the king. The dagger came from someone who knew exactly what it would do. And I think you deserve to know whose hand shaped that weapon." They descended into the lower halls, where the air grew colder and the torches burned lower. Eleanor led her to a narrow door bound with iron. "Few come here," she said. "It is where the records of the old wars are kept, and the secrets of kings." The room beyond was small, filled with shelves of scrolls and relics. Dust lay thick on everything. In the center stood a long table, and upon it rested the dagger, the same one Marcus had used to wound Lucian. Its blade was black as pitch, its hilt engraved with curling symbols that shimmered faintly in the torchlight. Eleanor motioned for Ava to come closer. "Do you see the mark along the edge?" Ava leaned in. There, near the base of the blade, a faint sigil was etched into the metal, a crescent moon wrapped in thorn vines. The same mark that had been carved into her mother's pendant. Her breath caught. "That's impossible." "I wish it were," Eleanor said. "This dagger was forged long before your birth. It was the weapon used in the first Lycan rebellion, a blade made to kill those of your bloodline." Ava stared at it, her pulse racing. "My family created this?" "Not your father's line," the elder said softly. "Your mother's." Ava took a step back. No, she wouldn't. Eleanor's gaze softened. Alara Thorne believed she could end the curse. The dagger was meant to cut the beast from the king's blood, to separate the man from the monster. But when her attempt failed, the council called it treason. They executed her before she could explain that she had made it for Lucian's father, not against him. Ava's throat tightened. "They told me she died in the fire." "She did," Eleanor said. "But not before the council used her creation to kill the old king and blamed her for the act. Marcus Vale witnessed it. He took her death as justification for his hatred. He raised you as punishment for her sins." The room spun. Ava gripped the edge of the table, staring down at the blade. The metal seemed to hum beneath her fingertips, as if remembering the blood it had spilled. "My mother tried to save them," she whispered, "and they made her a monster." "History repeats itself," Eleanor murmured. "They have tried to do the same to you." Before Ava could answer, a voice spoke from the doorway. "She succeeded!" Ava turned. Lucian stood there, pale and unsteady, his eyes shadowed. His shirt hung loose over his bandaged side, and the faint glow of the bond between them flickered against his skin. Eleanor bowed her head. "You should be resting." Lucian ignored her, stepping into the room. "I heard everything." His gaze fell on the dagger. "My father's blood is still on that blade. I saw it happen. He was already lost to the beast. Alara Thorne gave him a merciful death." Ava's knees nearly gave way. "She killed him?" Lucian's expression softened. "She saved him, Ava." The curse would have turned him into something worse. She used the dagger to end it before it spread to the rest of the realm. He reached for her hand. You were never the daughter of a traitor. You were born from mercy. Tears burned her eyes. For the first time in her life, the burden of shame she had carried for her family began to lift. But beneath it rose something darker, a realization that the council had known this truth all along and buried it to control them both. They've lied to us for generations, she said. They built their power on that lie. Lucian nodded. And now they will pay for it. Eleanor placed a hand on his arm. Be careful, my king. The truth is a weapon, but so is vengeance. The council will not fall quietly. Lucian's jaw tightened. Then we'll make them scream. He turned to Ava, his eyes fierce with resolve. You are not my weakness, Ava Thorn. You are the blade they feared most, the blood of the moon and the air of the thorn. Together, we end this. She met his gaze and nodded. Then it ends with us. That night they stood on the battlements of the fortress, the snow swirling around them in ghostly spirals. Below, the valley stretched into darkness, and beyond it, the faint glimmer of torches marked the camps of men who once called Lucian king but now whispered rebellion. Ava rested her hands on the cold stone. Do you think the curse will ever truly die? Lucian stood beside her, his cloak whipping in the wind. Curses don't die, he said. They sleep. But we can choose what wakes in their place. She looked up at him. And what if it's something worse? He smiled faintly. Then we'll face it together. The wind howled through the mountains, carrying the scent of coming war. Far below, the first wolf's cry rose into the night, a sound of mourning and defiance both. Ava closed her eyes, and the bond between them pulsed once, bright and certain. The past had written their fates in blood, but the future would be theirs to carve. And as the snow fell heavier, cloaking the world in white, the whispers in the stone spoke one final time that night, soft, reverent, and full of promise. The beast has found its moon. The curse remembers its maker. The end will begin where mercy was born. The night before the war began was too quiet. Snow drifted soundlessly against the windows, and the fortress, usually alive with howls and the hum of steel, felt hollow, as if the mountain itself held its breath. The scent of smoke had faded, but the memory of fire clung to the walls. Ava Thorn stood in the chamber she had come to think of as both sanctuary and cage, her reflection trembling in the glass. Beyond it, torches burned along the parapets like a line of dying stars. Lucian sat near the hearth, stripped of armor, his hands braced on his knees. The fire painted him in amber and gold, but the light only deepened the shadows beneath his eyes. The wound along his side had healed, yet he looked weaker, as though each day had taken something from him that would not return. The council will come at dawn, he said. His voice was low, almost calm. They've gathered every traitor they could find. Wolves from the Holloway and Vale lines, even remnants of the old border packs. They mean to end this before word of our survival spreads. Ava crossed the room to him, her bare feet silent against the stone. You should rest. He lifted his gaze to her. And dream of what? Of fire? Of blood? There's no rest left in me, Ava. The curse won't allow it. She knelt before him, placing a hand against his chest. The rhythm of his heart was steady, but beneath it she felt something else, a tremor, faint but growing. The beast waiting in the dark. You tamed it once, she whispered. You'll do it again. His mouth twisted in a faint smile. You tamed it, little moon, not I. She shook her head. Then let me do it again. He caught her wrist gently, his thumb tracing the mark of their bond where it shimmered beneath her skin. You don't understand what happens when it takes me fully. The beast doesn't love, doesn't protect, it destroys. If I lose control tomorrow, I will not stop until there's nothing left standing, not even you. Then you won't lose control, she said. He laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. You have too much faith in a broken thing. Maybe, she said, but it's mine now. Lucian's eyes softened, but the fire's glow caught in them, flashing gold. You shouldn't have bound yourself to me. You deserve a life that isn't built on blood. I think that Ava's hand slid to his cheek. And you deserve a life that isn't built on loneliness. For a long time, they simply looked at one another, the silence between them thick and fragile. Then Lucian leaned forward, his forehead resting against hers. If the council takes the fortress, he murmured, you must run. Find Eleanor. She'll protect you. I won't leave you. He drew back slightly, his voice hardening. You will if I tell you to. Her answer was immediate. No. A when B. Yes, R dove in R. He exhaled sharply, half frustration, half admiration. You are impossible. You made me this way. The corners of his mouth lifted, a fleeting echo of the man he had been before the crown, before the curse. Then his expression shifted, the weight of what was coming settling back over him like armor. I need to show you something, he said. He stood, crossing to the table where his sword lay unsheathed. The blade glimmered faintly, its edge etched with runes that pulsed like veins of moonlight. He ran his hand over the hilt. This sword belonged to the first Alpha King. It was forged in the same fire that birthed your mother's dagger. They were meant to balance each other, one to destroy, one to protect. Two halves of the same promise. He turned the blade so the runes reflected against her face. Tomorrow this will drink blood again. But if the beast rises, I want you to take it and end me before I destroy what's left of our world. Ava recoiled. No, you must. I can't. You can, he said, his tone final. You're the only one who can. The curse was born of my blood, but your blood can break it. Her eyes filled with tears. Lucian, I won't kill you. He stepped closer, cupping her face in his hands. Then save me, if you can. She reached up, gripping his wrists. I already have. And think. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then he pulled her into his arms. She went willingly, feeling his breath against her hair, the wildness in him pulsing beneath the surface. His heartbeat thundered in her chest through the bond, faster and stronger, until she couldn't tell where hers ended and his began. You've changed everything, he murmured. You've made me want something I don't deserve. What? She asked. A future. Which? He kissed her then, not with desperation, but with the quiet finality of a man who knew he might not see another dawn. The bond between them burned brighter than ever, flaring white-hot, spilling light into every corner of the room. The whispers in the stone rose with it, chanting words she couldn't understand, a language older than God's. When they finally broke apart, both were trembling. If I lose myself, he said, call me back. I will. I am Z's, and if I can't come back, then I'll find you wherever you go. He smiled faintly. You really are a fool. So are you. They stayed like that until the fire burned low, until exhaustion finally claimed him and his head rested in her lap. She ran her fingers through his hair, listening to the slow rhythm of his breathing. Somewhere deep in the mountain, she felt the stirrings of power, the beast waking, the curse gathering its strength. The fortress slept uneasily, aware that dawn would bring blood. When the first light touched the horizon, the horns of war sounded. Ava stood beside Lucian on the battlements, her cloak snapping in the wind. Below them, the enemy gathered in ranks, wolves in armor bearing the banners of the Holloway and Vale lines. Snow glittered on their blades, the air reeked of fear and fury. Lucian's hand found hers. Stay behind me, he said. She squeezed his fingers. Not this time. I've insane. He opened his mouth to protest, but the horn sounded again, and the first arrow split the air. Lucian drew his sword, its runes blazing with golden light. His eyes flared to match. The battle began. The courtyard filled with the roar of wolves, the clash of steel, the hiss of arrows. Lucian moved like the storm he had always been, precise, relentless, unstoppable. His sword cut through men and monsters alike, each strike a perfect balance of grace and savagery. Ava followed him into the fray, her hands burning with silver fire as she wielded the strange power that had begun to bloom in her veins. But the curse was waiting. She saw it in the moment his blade met another's, how the black veins along his neck darkened, how his eyes gleamed too bright. The beast inside him had smelled blood. "Lucian!" she shouted. He turned toward her, his face contorted, his breath coming in growls. The bond between them pulsed violently, and pain lanced through her chest. She staggered, clutching her heart. The world tilted. The sound of the battle dimmed, and in that heartbeat of silence she saw him, not the man, not the king, but the beast, massive and terrible, his eyes molten gold, his teeth bared in grief and rage. Ava stepped toward him, ignoring the screams and the clash of steel. "Lucian," she whispered. "It's me." It not. The beast snarled, lowering his head, his claws carving furrows into the snow. "Look at me," she said, louder now, the wind tearing her words away. "You promised you'd come back." He lunged. Ava did not flinch. She raised her hands, and the silver fire leapt from her palms, wrapping around them both in blinding light. The world disappeared in the roar of it. When the light faded, the battlefield was silent. Snow fell in slow, lazy spirals. Soldiers stared wide-eyed as the flames died down. Where the beast had stood, Lucian knelt, naked and human once more, his arms wrapped around Ava's limp body. Her head rested against his chest, her eyes were closed, her skin pale. The mark of the bond glowed faintly between them, silver for her, gold for him. Lucian's voice broke the silence, hoarse and hollow. "Ava," he whispered, "please." The wind carried his words across the field. No answer came. He pressed his forehead to hers, his breath shuddering. "You called me back," he said, "and I wasn't strong enough to save you." The mark on his throat flared once, then dimmed. Around them, the soldiers lowered their weapons, the whispers of war fading into mourning. Ava did not stir. The beast within Lucian wept in silence. The moon rose over the mountains, cold and distant, and for the first time in centuries, the Alpha King bowed his head to it. In the arms of the beast, the daughter of the moon slept, her light fading into him until only his shadow remained. Snow fell softly over the battlefield, blanketing blood and broken steel in a silence so absolute it felt sacred. The wind carried the last whispers of the dying, but the fortress stood still, its torches guttered, its walls stained with the memory of what had been lost. At the center of that stillness knelt the Alpha King. Lucian cradled Ava Thorne's body in his arms, his blood mixing with hers where it had dried along their wrists and necks. Her hair, streaked with ash and silver light, spilled over his chest like a river frozen midstream. Her skin was pale, too pale, and her lips, once soft with defiance, were parted as if she were about to speak. "Please," he whispered, his voice a wound. "Not like this." "Is a nicked?" He rocked her gently, as though she were only sleeping, as though his warmth could coax her back from whatever cold place had claimed her. The snow clung to his lashes and hair, melting into tears that he did not wipe away. Around him, the remnants of his army watched in silence. No one dared approach. They had seen what happened when the beast took him. They had seen how she, the small, stubborn woman, had stood before him and brought him back. Now they watched the Alpha King, once the terror of nations, broken by something as simple and unstoppable as grief. Eleanor Wren stepped forward at last, her old bones stiff from the cold. "Lucian," she said softly, "you must let her go." He looked up at her, his eyes hollow. "I cannot. The bond, she's still here." "Her body is gone," Eleanor said. "Her spirit is free." He shook his head. "No." He placed his hand over her heart. "Feel it. It's faint, but it's there." Eleanor hesitated. Then she knelt beside them, pressing her palm to Ava's chest. For a moment, she felt nothing. Only the cold. But then, yes, a whisper of rhythm, so small it might have been imagination. "She's between worlds," the elder murmured, "neither gone nor living." Lucian's grip tightened. "Then I'll follow her." Eleanor's eyes widened. "You would throw away what she died to save?" "She died for me," he said bitterly, "and I cannot live with that." He stood, lifting Ava's body as though she weighed nothing. The soldiers stepped back, their faces pale. Where are you going? Eleanor called. To the altar, Lucian said, to where this began. The path up the mountain was a wound carved into stone. Lucian walked it barefoot, the snow turning pink beneath his steps. Ava's body rested in his arms, untouched by the cold. The wind keened around them, carrying whispers that were not his own. She is not gone. She is waiting. The moon remembers its daughter. At the summit, the ruins of the moon temple awaited columns cracked by time, the altar half buried in frost. It was here centuries ago that the first Alpha had sworn his oath to the moon and been cursed for his pride. It was here Lucian's father had come to beg for mercy and found none. Lucian laid Ava's body upon the altar. The stone glowed faintly beneath her, as though recognizing her blood. Her hair spread around her like spilled starlight. He knelt beside her, his voice breaking. You gave me back my soul, Ava. I will give you back your life. He drew a dagger from his belt, the same one she had healed him with in the dungeon. Its blade was silver, its hilt engraved with her mother's mark. Blood calls to blood, he murmured. The curse was born of it. Let it end with it. He pressed the blade to his palm and drew it across the skin. Blood welled, dark and hot, falling in thick drops onto the stone beside her. The wind screamed. The air turned heavy, thick with power. Eleanor appeared at the edge of the ruins, breathless from the climb. Lucian, stop. You can't trade one life for another. The curse demands balance. It will take more than your blood. I have nothing else left to give. The moon broke through the clouds then, flooding the temple in silver light. It bathed Ava's body, her skin shimmering with an otherworldly glow. The mark on her wrist flared the same mark that bound her to him. Lucian gasped, stumbling back. The bond between them, dim since her fall, pulsed once then again, stronger. The whispers returned, surrounding him. The beast bows to the moon. The blood returns to the light. Ava's fingers twitched. Lucian froze. Ava? Her chest rose in a shallow breath. The faintest sound escaped her lips, a sigh like wind through leaves. Eleanor fell to her knees. It's not possible. Lucian reached for her hand, pressing it to his cheek. Her skin was still cold, but beneath it, life stirred. The light around her grew brighter until he could no longer see her face. The glow rose in a column that split the sky, and the storm broke apart. When it faded, Ava was breathing. Her eyes fluttered open, silver in the moonlight. Lucian fell to his knees beside her, his voice a ragged whisper. You came back. Ava blinked slowly, her gaze finding his. You shouldn't have called me, she said, her voice soft but steady. The veil doesn't like to be crossed. He let out a shaky laugh, half sob. I'd tear it apart 1,000 times if it meant you'd return. She smiled faintly. You always were terrible at letting go. He gathered her into his arms, holding her as though she might vanish again. You died, he murmured against her hair. I felt it. I did, she said. But the moon wasn't finished with me. Eleanor approached cautiously. What are you now, child? Ava looked at her hands. The faint silver veins that had appeared when she healed Lucian now glowed softly beneath her skin. I don't know, she said, but I can feel them. All of them. The voices, the wolves, the mountain, they're alive inside me. The blood of the lichen, Eleanor said reverently, the daughter of the moon reborn. Lucian's eyes darkened with awe and fear. Does this mean the curse is broken? Ava shook her head. No, not broken. Changed. She touched his chest where the bond mark burned faintly. It's no longer a chain, it's a bridge. What happens to one no longer destroys the other, it strengthens. He took her hand, pressing it to his heart. Then we faced the dawn together. She nodded. They descended the mountain as the first light touched the horizon. The soldiers waiting below saw them and fell to their knees. Word spread like wildfire. The Omega, who had died in the arms of the king, had returned, reborn under the moon's light. Lucian carried her into the courtyard, where the ashes of the pyre still smoldered. Ava knelt, placing her palm over the blackened earth. A silver glow rippled from her touch, spreading through the stones. The scars left by the fire began to fade, the ground healing as though time itself obeyed her. Eleanor bowed her head. The goddess has returned in her blood. Lucian looked down at her, the weight of centuries in his eyes. No, he said softly. Not a goddess. A queen. The same way is all seen. Ava rose, her hair catching the morning light. The soldiers bowed as she passed, and for the first time, Lucian bowed too, not as a king, but as a man who had found redemption in the light of the moon. The prophecy whispered through the wind once more. The daughter of the moon will fall and rise. The beast will kneel, and the dawn will come on silver wings. Ava lifted her gaze to the horizon. The world was broken still, bleeding and uncertain, but for the first time, she believed it could heal. And as she stood in the place where she had died, wrapped in the light of the moon that had called her back, Ava Thorne understood what she had become. Not merely the Alpha King's mate, but the living bridge between shadow and dawn. Dawn came quietly over the mountains, spreading soft gold through the ruins of the battlefield. The air smelled of iron, pine, and something new hope, fragile but breathing. For the first time in decades, the wolves of the realm woke to a world without the sound of chains rattling in their blood. From the fortress walls, the valley stretched below like a wound that had begun to close. The snow still bore stains of battle, but already the wind was erasing them, sweeping the past into drifts of white. At the heart of it all stood Ava Thorne. Her hair, pale as moonlight, moved in the morning breeze, her silver-marked hands clasped before her. The soldiers who once whispered her name in fear now watched in reverence. When she raised her gaze, her eyes gleamed with the calm light of someone who had crossed death and returned with fire in her veins. Behind her, the great doors of the keep groaned open. Lucian emerged, walking with deliberate care, every step a test of strength. His wound had closed, but his eyes, those molten gold eyes, still carried the echo of the beast. He had not spoken since the night she rose again. He had only watched her as if afraid that words might undo the miracle he'd been given. The soldiers bowed as he passed, their voices rising in low murmurs of Alpha King. He acknowledged none of them. His gaze was fixed on her. Ava turned when she heard his steps. The light caught his hair, the line of his jaw, the mark of the bond glowing faintly beneath his collarbone. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. The silence between them was both wound and healing. "You shouldn't be on your feet," she said at last. Lucian smiled faintly. "And miss seeing the world reborn? Never." He stopped a few paces away, his voice quiet but unyielding. "You died in my arms." "I did," she said, her tone soft. "And yet I stand." He exhaled, shaking his head. "I thought the curse had stolen everything from me, but it only wanted a price." Ava stepped closer. "It took both of us to pay it." Lucian's jaw tightened. "If there is one mercy in all this, it is that you returned." "But what are you now, Ava? Human? Lichen? Something else entirely?" She looked past him, toward the mountains still crowned with snow. "I am what the curse made me, what the moon allowed. The blood of lichen still runs through me, but it no longer hungers, it listens. Is no how." Lucian studied her, his expression torn between awe and fear. "And what does it say?" "That the beast in you was never meant to be caged," she said, "only understood." He went very still. "You think I can be tamed?" "No," she said, "I think you can be healed." For the first time he laughed quiet, raw, disbelieving. "You speak as if I am still worth saving." Ava reached out, her fingertips brushing his chest, where the mark of the bond glowed faintly. "You already were. You just didn't believe it." He caught her wrist gently, pressing her palm flat against his heart. "And what of you, little moon? You bear power the world hasn't seen in centuries. The packs will come to worship you or to fear you." "Let them come," she said. "Fear and faith are the same thing at their root. Both are only proof that something greater has stirred. Lucian's smile faded. You sound like Eleanor. Ava's eyes softened. She says I remind her of your mother. That startled him. He looked away toward the horizon, where the sun climbed slowly from behind the peaks. My mother believed the curse could be cleansed by sacrifice. She was wrong. Maybe not wrong, Ava murmured. Just early. The silence stretched between them again, but this time it was full of something quiet and alive. Lucian's hand rose to her cheek. When you died, he said, I broke. There was no king left, no man, no beast, only emptiness. I thought that was the end. Isn't that one thing as Maber? Ava leaned into his touch. It was the beginning. He looked at her for a long moment, then lowered his head until their foreheads touched. If I could rewrite this world, I would make it one where you never had to bleed for me. She smiled faintly. Then I would never have found you. The words broke something in him. He drew her into his arms, holding her tightly. The warmth between them grew until the mark of their bond flared silver and gold entwined, casting light across the courtyard. The soldiers who witnessed it would speak of that moment for generations. The dawn when the Alpha King bowed his head, not in defeat, but in devotion. When he finally released her, his expression had changed. The fire in his eyes was no longer anger, it was resolve. The council's remnants still gather in the east, he said. Their lords hide behind old bloodlines, but they will not stop until they reclaim what they lost. Then we end it, Ava said, not with more fire, with truth. Lucian nodded slowly. Truth is the sharpest blade. It cuts both ways. Eleanor approached then, leaning on her staff. The people are waiting, she said. They've seen the moon rise and the sun return in the same sky. They need to hear what it means. Lucian looked at Ava. They'll listen to you more than they will to me. Then we speak together, she said. By noon, the fortress courtyard was filled. Wolves and soldiers, nobles and servants, all gathered to witness what they could not yet name. Lucian stood on the steps of the dais, Ava beside him. The sunlight burned bright, catching in her hair and his armor until they looked like two halves of the same light. Lucian's voice carried across the crowd. For generations, our kind have lived under a curse of blood and pride. We called it strength, we called it power, but it was fear. Fear of ourselves, fear of each other. That ends today. I saw it. He turned to Ava. She stepped forward, her voice clear and calm. The curse was not punishment, it was a mirror. It showed us what happens when we let darkness rule without compassion. It was meant to be tamed, not destroyed. The crowd murmured. She raised her hand. The silver light flared again, tracing the mark on her wrist. The moon does not demand submission, it offers balance. The beast and the light, the king and the queen, neither above, neither beneath. Lucian took her hand, raising it with his own. From this day, he said, we rule as one, Alpha King and Moon Queen. Our reign will not be written in conquest, but in rebuilding. The pacts will be free, and the bloodlines cleansed of lies. The courtyard erupted in sound howls, cheers, the clash of hands over hearts. Wolves shifted and bowed, their voices rising together in a harmony that shook the mountains. Eleanor smiled faintly. The prophecy is fulfilled, she murmured. But Ava, standing beside Lucian, felt something deeper. This was not an ending. It was the fragile, dangerous beginning of peace. Lucian looked at her, and in his eyes she saw not the beast or the king, but the man. So he said quietly, "What do we do now, little moon?" Ava smiled. "We teach them how to live without fear." He chuckled. "That might be the hardest battle of all. Then it's a good thing we're both stubborn." He kissed her hand, the gesture reverent, timeless. "To the stubborn," he said. "To the savage," she answered, smiling. "Tamed at last." And as the sun climbed higher, gilding the world in gold and silver, the Alpha King and his Moon Queen stood side by side atop the mountain, bound not by curse or law, but by choice. The beast was tamed, the kingdom reborn, and the age of blood gave way to the age of light. Far above them, the moon lingered in the daylight sky, a pale witness to its daughter's promise, while the whispers of the mountain faded into peace. The beast is no more. The moon reigns eternal, and love, at last, has tamed the savage. The weeks after the battle blurred into something almost unreal, days measured not by blood and smoke, but by rebuilding, by breath. The fortress that had once been a tomb for kings began to live again. Wolves returned from the mountains, farmers from burned villages came seeking peace, and soldiers who had known only war now learned to stand guard in a kingdom that was beginning, at last, to heal. But peace, Ava Thorne quickly learned, was not silence. Every stone she touched seemed to remember what had been done to it. The screams, the fire, the betrayal. Sometimes, late at night, she could still hear the whispers in the walls. Only now they were not warnings, they were questions. What now? What next? Lucian found her often on the highest balcony, the one that looked east toward the snowfields. That morning was no different. The sun was rising pale and distant, gilding her hair with faint light. "You're awake too early," he said, stepping into the cold. She smiled faintly. "So are you." "Kings don't sleep easily," he said. "Especially kings who have spent half their lives fighting ghosts." Ava turned to face him. "Are they still haunting you?" Lucian shrugged, his eyes on the horizon. "Less than they used to. The curse is quiet now. But sometimes I still hear it in the back of my head, like a song I can't quite forget." "The beast?" He nodded. "He's still there, watching, waiting." Ava took his hand and pressed it to her chest. "Then let him wait. He'll learn patience." Lucian laughed quietly, a sound she'd never tire of hearing. "You're cruel to him. He deserves it. As not mean how in be laugh." "Perhaps he does," Lucian said. "But so do the men who followed Marcus. The remnants of the council still move in the east. Holloway's sons gather an army. If I do nothing, the peace we've built will fall before spring." "Then we don't do nothing," Ava said. "We go to them, not with blades, but with truth." He frowned. "You think they'll listen?" She looked out across the valley. "They listened to fear for centuries. Maybe it's time they learned to listen to hope." "No." Lucian studied her for a long moment. "You speak like a queen." Ava smiled. "I've had a good teacher." By the next morning, word had spread across the realm. The Alpha King and the Moon Queen would hold a gathering at the fortress to forge the new covenant. Every pack, every lord, every bloodline was invited to stand before them and decide their allegiance. They came in waves, some out of loyalty, some out of fear, some because curiosity was stronger than caution. The courtyard filled again, not with soldiers this time, but with people, men and women, wolves and humans alike, who had lived too long in the shadow of a curse. Lucian stood at the top of the dais, his armor polished but unadorned, his crown resting at his side. Ava stood beside him, dressed in silver that caught the sunlight like water. Her mark glowed faintly against her skin, the living symbol of the bond that had remade their world. When Lucian raised his hand, the crowd fell silent. "Once," he began, "I believed strength was the only way to rule. That fear was the only way to keep peace. But fear breeds nothing but more fear, and strength without mercy becomes cruelty. I know this because I have lived it, because I have been it." He turned slightly, his gaze finding Ava. "But she taught me that power is not in the roar of the beast, but in the hand that quiets it." A murmur swept through the crowd. Ava stepped forward. "The blood that runs in me once carried a curse," she said, her voice clear and sure. "And so did his. Together we changed it, not by destroying it, but by understanding it." The curse was not punishment, it was a lesson. A warning that even the strongest hearts must learn humility, and even the gentlest souls must learn strength. Her eyes swept across the faces before her. "We are not beasts to be ruled. We are not prey to be hunted. We are a people, bound by choice, not fear." From this day forward, the pacts will serve no throne forged in blood. The old laws die with the old world. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then one voice rose, a single wolf's howl, long and low. Another joined it, then another. Soon the air was full of them, a song that carried across the valley and echoed through the mountains. Lucian took Ava's hand, lifting it high. Let it be known, he said, that this day marks the beginning of the new era, the era of the moon and the fang. The thing. The courtyard erupted in sound, cheers, howls, tears. Even the wind seemed to rise with them, sweeping through the banners until they danced like living fire. That night, the fortress was alive with celebration. Fires burned in every courtyard, and songs, real songs, not the chants of war, filled the air. Wolves shifted freely among the people, no longer feared but welcomed. Lucian and Ava watched from the balcony above it all. The moon hung full and bright above them, its light silvering the stone. They're laughing, Ava said softly. Do you hear it? Lucian smiled. It's strange. I don't think I've ever heard this place sound like joy. They're free, she said. So are we. He turned to her. Not yet. There's still something left unfinished. She frowned. What? He reached into the folds of his cloak and drew out the crown, but it was different now remade. No longer gold, no longer the spiked circlet of old kings. It had been reforged in silver and dark iron, shaped into twin arcs, one for the sun, one for the moon. He held it out to her. You are the heart of this kingdom, Ava Thorne. I would not wear this without you. Her breath caught. Lucian. He shook his head. No more titles. No more thrones built from fear. We will share it or not at all. She took the crown, her fingers brushing his. The bond between them pulsed once, bright as lightning, then settled into warmth. Together they lifted it and placed it upon both their heads, the twin arcs fitting perfectly. When they faced the crowd below, the cheers rose again, rolling like thunder through the night. Eleanor Wren, watching from the shadows, smiled through her tears. The curse has found its ending, she whispered, and the world at last its beginning. Later, when the torches burned low and the songs faded into the hush of dawn, Ava stood beside Lucian on the balcony once more. The air was cold, but the warmth of him at her back made her shiver for other reasons. Do you hear them? She asked softly. The wolves? No, she said, closing her eyes. The whispers. He tilted his head. What did they say? She smiled. They say, the beast sleeps, the moon watches, and love. She turned to face him. Love endures. Lucian's hand came up to cup her cheek. Then let's give them something to whisper about. He kissed her under the rising sun, and the world felt, for the first time, whole. Below, the kingdom stirred awake, reborn. Above, the moon lingered in daylight, as if to bless what it saw. And as the new day broke over the mountains, its light gleaming on the twin crown of silver and shadow, the prophecy completed its final verse. The beast is tamed. The moon ascends. Two hearts reign, where one once ends. In love's soft light, the world begins again. Winter thawed slowly that year, as if the mountain itself were reluctant to believe the war was truly over. Streams that had once run red with blood turned clear again, carrying away the last memory of battle. The snow melted from the walls of the fortress, revealing old carvings long buried under centuries of ice wolves, moons, crowns, and a single line etched in a forgotten hand: balance, not dominion. Ava Thorne ran her fingers over the inscription one morning, tracing the faded words as sunlight spilled over the stones. She had found it beneath the outer gate while walking among the workers rebuilding the battlements. The phrase stirred something in her, an echo of all they had fought for. Behind her, she heard Lucian's voice, low and warm. It suits you. She turned. He stood a few paces away, his hair damp from the cold air, his armor left unbuckled. For once, he looked not like a king, but like a man. What does? She asked. That motto. He stepped closer. Balance, not dominion. It sounds like something you'd carve into the world if you could. Maybe I will. She smiled faintly, though I think the world would argue back. He laughed softly. It always does. He glanced toward the mountains, where the first buds of green had begun to break through the snow. The packs are restless again, not from anger this time. Uncertainty. They don't know what to make of peace. They'll learn, Ava said, but peace is like a wild thing. It has to be fed, and it doesn't trust easily. Lucian gave a thoughtful nod. You speak like a ruler. She arched an eyebrow. And you sound like a man who still doesn't know what to do when there's no war to fight. As the fattened sherd of sea, he smirked. You're not wrong. Then, more quietly, sometimes I still wake in the night and expect the walls to shake with battle. I miss the simplicity of it, kill or be killed. Peace asks for patience, and patience was never my virtue. Then learn it, she said gently. The kingdom can't survive on strength alone. It needs a heart, not a weapon. He reached for her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. That's why you're here. Ava looked down at their joined hands. No, that's why we're here. The following moon marked the first council of the new era. Where once the hall had been filled with fear and rivalry, it now echoed with voices, debating, laughing, even disagreeing without bloodshed. Representatives from every pack came: wolves from the southern plains, the mountain tribes, even the long-exiled clans of the Vale. Ava sat at Lucian's side on the throne dais, though the twin crown rested between them on the table instead of upon their heads. A symbol of unity, she had told him, not superiority. Lord Cavan of the Holloway pack rose first. Your Majesty, he began, bowing to Lucian, then to Ava. We've gathered the remnants of the old council. Many fled to the east after Marcus's death, but they're seeking amnesty. They swear loyalty to the new crown. Lucian leaned forward. Do they swear loyalty to peace? Cavan hesitated. They swear survival. Perhaps peace will follow. A murmur rippled through the hall. Ava watched Lucian closely. Once, the answer to such defiance would have been swift and violent, but now he only nodded. Then they will live under watch. Trust must be earned. Ava added, and forgiveness is not surrender. We rebuild by mending, not by forgetting. The hall fell quiet. Some nodded in agreement, others exchanged uneasy glances. Change was slower than war, but change, she reminded herself, was life. After the meeting, when the hall had emptied, Lucian sank into his chair with a sigh. You handled them better than I did. You handled them differently, she said. That's progress. He chuckled. I'm starting to think progress is just another word for exhaustion. She smiled, resting her hand on his. You'll live. He looked up at her, a flicker of something softer in his gaze. Only because of you. That night, the fortress was quiet again. No drums, no horns, only the wind moving gently through the pine trees below. Ava stood on the balcony, the moon hanging bright above her. Its light caught on the silver mark that still glowed faintly on her wrist, the symbol of her bond with Lucian. Eleanor Wren joined her, moving slowly, but with the calm dignity of one who had seen too much to fear anything anymore. It suits you, the elder said, nodding toward the moonlight crown that rested on the nearby table. I still don't know if I'm worthy of it, Ava admitted. Eleanor smiled faintly. No one ever is. That's why those who doubt themselves are the ones who should wear it. She leaned on her staff. The goddess chose well. The beast needed his moon, and the world needed both. Ava looked toward the horizon. And you? What will you do now that the world doesn't need saving? The old woman's smile turned wistful. Perhaps I'll rest, or perhaps I'll watch. The world never truly stops needing saving, child. It just changes the names of the ones who do it. Ava nodded slowly. Then watch over us a little longer. Eleanor's eyes softened. Always. Later, when the moon climbed high and silvered the entire fortress, Lucian joined her. He came without armor, without crown, only himself. The wolves are quiet tonight, he said. They're learning how to sleep without fear. He came to stand behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist, his chin resting lightly against her shoulder. So am I, he murmured. They stood that way for a long time, looking out over their kingdom. The air was cold, but the bond between them burned warm. Do you think this will last? Lucian asked quietly. Peace never does. Then we'll make it last, Ava said, not because it's easy, but because no one else ever dared to try. He pressed a kiss to her hair. You sound like prophecy again. She smiled. Maybe I've stopped running from it. He turned her to face him. And what does the prophecy say now, my queen? That the beast no longer needs to be tamed, she whispered, tracing the line of his jaw, because he finally learned how to love. Lucian kissed her, slow and certain. The moonlight wrapped around them, and the world outside seemed to fade away until there was only the sound of their hearts beating together, the rhythm that had rewritten the curse. When they finally broke apart, the night was still. Lucian brushed a strand of hair from her face. The age of wolves begins, he said softly. Ava smiled. Then, let's rule it well. They turned back toward the horizon together, the twin crown glinting faintly in the moonlight beside them. The whispers in the stone, those ancient voices that had once warned of doom, rose one final time. Their tone changed at last, from sorrow to song. The beast has found his heart, the moon her home. Together they reign, and the world is whole. And beneath that eternal moon, in the kingdom reborn from blood and fire, the Alpha King and his Moon Queen began their rule not of fear or conquest, but of harmony. Their story would become legend. Their love, the balance that would outlast empires. And the world at last remembered peace. Spring came late that year, cautious and trembling, as though unsure it was welcome in a world that had forgotten gentleness. The last snow melted down the mountain in silver ribbons, and the fortress that had once been a monument to war now rang with the laughter of builders and the chatter of merchants. Children played in the courtyards where kings had once spilled blood for power. But peace, as Ava Thorne had learned, was a living thing. It grew, but it also ached. It demanded tending. From her study in the western tower, Ava watched the sunrise through the frost-lined windows, her hands resting on the table strewn with letters and petitions. The ink on her fingertips had become her new weapon. The crown on her desk caught the morning light, its twin arcs of silver and dark steel gleaming faintly. She no longer wore it often. Lucian joked that she ruled best without it. Lucian himself stood by the window, his back to her, his broad shoulders outlined by dawn. He had traded his armor for a dark tunic. His sword still sheathed at his side, he wore it less for defense now, and more as a reminder of who he had been. They want us to move the capital, he said finally, not turning from the light. To build a new palace on the plains. A kingdom without ghosts. Ava set down her quill. A kingdom without ghosts is a kingdom without memory. Lucian smiled faintly. That's what I told them. And? They asked whether the king and queen of wolves had started listening to their ghosts. She rose, crossing to him. We never stopped. He turned then, catching her around the waist and drawing her close. You've become far too wise for me. I've always been wiser than you, she said, but her tone was soft, teasing. He bent his head, his forehead resting against hers. You've also become harder to protect. Good, she whispered. That means you taught me well. For a few breaths, they simply stood together in the hush of morning. The world below them was quiet, the valley, the rebuilt villages, the people who were learning to live rather than to fear. It should have been enough. But the shadow came, as shadows always did. By midday, a rider arrived at the gates. His horse lathered, his armor marked by a sigil no one had seen in years, the twin fang of the Holloway bloodline, crossed by the crescent moon of the old priesthood. Lucian met him in the courtyard, Ava at his side. The rider dismounted with shaking hands and bowed low. Your Majesty, Your Grace, forgive the intrusion. I bring word from the eastern border. Lucian's voice was calm. Speak. The old temple at Black Hollow, it's awake. A chill ran through the crowd that had gathered. Ava stepped forward. Awake? The messenger swallowed hard. The moonstones are bleeding, my queen, and the dead whisper your names. The courtyard fell silent. Lucian's eyes darkened, the gold within them glinting like fire. The curse is gone, he said. I ended it. The messenger met his gaze with terror. Then why does the mountain bleed again? That night, the council gathered in the war room for the first time since peace had been declared. Maps covered the table, ink still wet from hurried reports. The Holloway lands, long, silent, and frozen, now burned with strange light. Hunters spoke of beasts with no scent, no soul. Ava studied the markings, her expression unreadable. The temple was sealed when your father died, she said. No one has entered it since. As Allers, Eleanor Wren, standing at her shoulder, nodded grimly. The first Alpha made his oath there. It was the cradle of the curse. If it stirs again, something has disturbed the seal. Lucian's jaw tightened. You think someone means to wake it? I think, Eleanor said, that darkness never dies, it waits. The room fell silent. Lucian turned to Ava. You feel it too, don't you? She hesitated, then nodded. The bond hums when I dream. It's faint, but it's the same power, the same hunger. It smells. Lucian reached across the table, his hand finding hers. We can't let it spread. No, Ava said quietly. We can't. Eleanor's voice broke the silence. Then the two of you must return to where it began, the Holloway Temple. The moon will be full in 3 nights. If the seal is broken, that's when it will wake completely. Lucian's gaze flicked toward the window, where the sky had already begun to darken. 3 nights, he murmured. It seems the gods enjoy giving us little time. I think really... Ava squeezed his hand. Then we won't waste it. The journey to Black Hollow was long and brutal. The air grew colder with each mile, the forests darker, the ground slick with ash. Wolves followed them at a distance, silent and uneasy, their yellow eyes gleaming through the mist. By the second night, they made camp on the edge of the Vale Forest. The fire crackled, but the warmth felt thin. Ava sat beside Lucian, her cloak pulled tight, her silver mark flickering faintly beneath her glove. What if it isn't the curse, she said. What if it's something worse? Lucian poked at the fire with a stick. Worse than centuries of madness and bloodshed? Worse than death, she said softly. Something that doesn't want to rule or destroy. Something that just wants to end. Lucian glanced at her, his expression unreadable. Then we end it first. She smiled faintly. You always make it sound so simple. It is simple, he said. You stand beside me. I fight whatever comes. We survive. She leaned her head against his shoulder. And if we don't? Then we die together, he said without hesitation. Ava closed her eyes. You never even tried to lie to me. I learned long ago you'd catch me if I did. By dawn, they reached the Holloway Temple. It rose from the cliffs like the bones of some sleeping god, carved from black stone that shimmered faintly under the moon's dying light. The great door stood open, the runes that had sealed them burned out and cold. The ground before the entrance was slick with something dark, not quite blood, not quite shadow. Ava stepped forward, the air around her growing heavier with every breath. It's calling, she whispered. It knows us. Lucian unsheathed his sword. The runes along the blade flared to life, answering the same power. Then, let's introduce ourselves properly. They crossed the threshold together. The darkness inside was alive. The walls pulsed with light, veins of red and silver running through the stone like blood through skin. At the center of the temple stood the moonstone altar split, cracked open from within. A faint figure knelt beside it, draped in tattered robes, whispering words that made the air vibrate. Lucian raised his sword. Step away. The figure lifted its head. Ava's breath caught. The face beneath the hood was not human. It was familiar, the curve of the jaw, the silver eyes, the mark of the moon carved into the skin. It was hers. Or rather, it was what she might have become had she never turned back from death. Pale, hollow, radiant, and ruined. The echo of her voice filled the chamber. You should not have come, little moon. Lucian moved in front of Ava, blade raised. What are you? The figure smiled, and when it did, the temple trembled. The part of her that stayed beyond the veil. The piece that belonged to the curse, not to love. Ava's pulse thundered. My shadow, she whispered. The one that didn't return. The creature's smile widened. I am what you cast aside to live, and I have been waiting. Lucian's grip tightened on his sword. You'll find we're not easy prey. The shadow tilted its head. I don't want your blood, Alpha King. I want your crown. Ava stepped forward, her eyes blazing. Then you'll have to kill me for it. As enough. The shadow laughed softly, the sound echoing through the cavernous dark. Oh, Ava Thorne, that's exactly what I intend to do. The air cracked like lightning. The runes on the walls blazed alive, and the temple began to shake. Lucian caught her arm, pulling her close as the floor split beneath them. Stay with me. I'm not going anywhere, she said, her voice steady. Above them, the moon rose full and crimson, flooding the shattered temple in bloodlight. The beast within Lucian stirred. The light within Ava flared. And as the shadow smiled, whispering words older than the mountain itself, the prophecy that had once been fulfilled began to unravel. The moon has two faces. One brings dawn. The other brings the end. The temple was alive with screaming light. The walls pulsed like veins. The floor rippled beneath their feet as if the mountain itself breathed. The air was thick with silver mist, the taste of blood and magic on every breath. Lucian's sword glowed gold in his hands, its runes flaring brighter than fire, while Ava's skin shimmered like frost, her mark burning white-hot beneath the surface. Before them stood the shadow. It smiled with Ava's face only sharper, crueler. Its eyes were endless pits of silver, reflecting everything and nothing. When it spoke, its voice carried in two tones. One soft and human, the other ancient and terrible. You should have stayed dead, it whispered. You belonged to the other side. You had no right to crawl back into the light. Ava's pulse thundered. The mark on her wrist blazed, answering its twin's glow. You're not real, she said, though her voice trembled. You're what the curse left behind. The shadow laughed. The sound fractured the air like breaking glass. Not real? I am every piece of you that bled for him. Every doubt, every whisper, every wound. I am the part that looked at the beast and saw herself. Lucian stepped in front of Ava, sword raised. You don't belong here. The shadow tilted its head, studying him. And you do? You think you can stand between us forever? The curse made you mine as much as it made her yours. You and I are bound by the same blood. Lucian's teeth clench. I won't let you touch her. You already did, it hissed. The moment you doubted her, the moment you killed for her, the moment you claimed her. You fed me with every act of love that was born from fear. The temple shook, dust raining from the ceiling. Ava reached for Lucian's arm. Don't listen. It feeds on guilt. He nodded, though his grip on his sword tightened until his knuckles went white. The shadow turned to Ava again. You could have stayed with me beyond the veil. We were whole there, no kings, no crowns, no curses, just light and peace. And now you've traded eternity for this. It gestured to the ruins, the war, the blood, a world that will always demand more of you than it gives. An infirmentize as a re-intimating, even all the pace prockers. I didn't come back for eternity, Ava said. I came back for him, for us. The shadow smiled thinly. Then die for him again. It raised its hand and the ground split open. From the fissure poured a tide of black smoke, taking the shapes of wolves massive, twisted things with glowing eyes and mouths full of darkness. Their howls made the air tremble. Lucian swung his sword, the blade cleaving through the first beast in a burst of light. Run, he shouted. I'm not leaving you. So last man I was scenes on, he caught her wrist. I need you alive. And I need you, human, she snapped back, the silver fire already gathering in her palms. We do this together. Their marks flared in unison. The bond ignited, forming a pulse of light that rippled outward. The smoke wolves recoiled, but the shadow only laughed, the sound a blade against their ears. So it begins again, it said, the beast and his moon fighting what they cannot kill. The light between Ava and Lucian grew brighter, burning through the mist. The shadow shrieked and vanished into the dark, but its laughter lingered. When the silence came, the temple was half collapsed. The moonstone altar lay shattered, its glow fading to ash. Lucian lowered his sword, his chest heaving. Is it gone? Ava shook her head. No. It's bound to me. Wherever I go, it follows. She looked down at her hands, faint veins of shadow threaded through the silver light beneath her skin. It's in me now. Lucian stepped closer, taking her face in his hands. Then we'll find a way to purge it. She looked up at him, eyes bright with tears. And if we can't, then we'll learn to live with it. They left the Holloway Temple at dawn. The valley below was wrapped in mist, the rising sun turning the clouds into rivers of gold. Wolves waited at the edge of the forest, Lucian's sentries watching with uneasy eyes as their king and queen emerged from the ruin. Ava walked beside Lucian in silence. The shadow in her veins pulsed softly, whispering in the back of her mind. You can't kill what you are. When they reached the clearing, Lucian turned to her. Whatever it was, it won't touch you again. She met his gaze. It already has. He looked as if he might argue, but then his expression softened. Then I'll fight it every day until there's nothing left to fight. Ava smiled faintly. You always think you can save me. I already did, he said. By the time they returned to the fortress, Eleanor was waiting at the gates. Her expression turned grim the instant she saw Ava's wrist. You brought it back with you. Ava nodded. It's part of me now. It was never meant to die. Eleanor touched her arm, her eyes closing briefly. The shadow in you is not evil, child. It is hunger. The curse always wanted balance. Light cannot exist without dark. Then why does it feel like it's waiting for something? Ava whispered. Eleanor's gaze flicked toward Lucian. Because it is. It feeds on what binds you, the bond between king and queen, beast and moon. The deeper your love, the stronger it grows. Lucian frowned. Then how do we stop it? Eleanor sighed. You don't. You temper it. Love will always carry shadow. Learn its shape, or it will learn you. That night, Ava stood alone in the courtyard beneath the full moon. The wind stirred her hair, carrying the faint scent of rain. The mark on her wrist pulsed softly, silver and black intertwined. Lucian joined her quietly. You can't sleep. Neither can you, she said without turning. He smiled, stepping closer. No, the bed is cold without you. She glanced at him, her expression soft but weary. I can feel it when I close my eyes, the shadow watching. It's patient. Love and grace. Lucian reached for her hand. Then let it watch. It can learn that we don't break easily. She leaned into him, resting her head against his chest. Do you ever think the gods are still watching us, that they set all this in motion to see how much we can endure? Lucian's arm tightened around her. Then let them watch too. We've endured worse. The moon rose higher, washing the courtyard in light. Their marks glowed faintly, twin flames in the dark, one silver, one gold, and now faintly threaded with shadow. Ava tilted her head up to look at him. Do you think peace can survive this? Lucian's smile was small, but certain. Peace isn't something that survives, Ava. It's something we make every day, with every choice. She kissed him then, softly, the bond between them flaring bright and steady. The whisper in her blood quieted for the first time. When they broke apart, she whispered, The shadow thinks it can take me. Lucian touched her cheek, his thumb tracing her jaw. Then it's forgotten who you are. He kissed her again, deeper this time, until the cold receded, until the only thing left in the night was warmth. Above them, the moonlight dimmed slightly as though blinking, and the shadow within Ava's veins pulsed once in response, a heartbeat waiting. Far below the mountain, deep in the ruins of the Holloway Temple, the fractured altar stirred. The light within its cracks began to glow again, this time darker than night. And the whispers returned. Two crowns cannot rule forever. One light must fade for the other to rise. The moon shone on, beautiful and indifferent, and peace once again began to tremble.